you should have something that pops up that gives me permission to record. So again, we're going to record today. If I have your email address later this afternoon, I will send you a copy of the class, my PowerPoints, and a little quiz. So with all of that being said, what do y'all say we just get started? So as we mentioned, we're here for a cram course. Hopefully we can get a lot of information, help prepare you guys for that exam on the 18th. Just a very brief introduction to myself. My name is Julie Campbell. Here's my phone number and email address. I always encourage you guys to reach out to me if you have any questions. If there's anything I can help with, I'm always available. I know my email address is long, but it really does make sense if you look at it, because who am I? I am Julie, the real estate instructor at gmail.com. So if you don't want to write all that down, you just think about who I am, and that'll be easier for you guys to remember. And then, of course, my phone number. If you want to, never hesitate to reach out if you have questions. We want you guys to get this information, understand this information. You guys figured out this is a lot, isn't it? This stuff is no joke, is it? So, you know, I hope you were told to hang on to your hats early on, because it's a fast-paced class, and we're going to cram as much information at you as we can. So anything that we can do from Carolina School of Real Estate to help you get this, we're here to help. So I want to start this morning. I know a great way to start the morning, but I want to start this morning having a conversation about agency. Agency is a heavily tested piece, units 7 and 8. Write that down. Units 7 and 8, all about agency, heavily tested. Agency is not only important for your exam, agency is also important for your career. Shake your head, yes or no. Do you think it's important to understand agency when you start working with buyers and sellers? When you meet a consumer for the first time, that you explain your relationship? Guys, here's the deal. Buyers and sellers don't know agency. They don't know the parameters of what we can and can't do. That's our job to know our job. That's not their job to know that. So we need a very good understanding of agency so we know how we can proceed with the buyers and sellers we're going to work with in the transactions, or landlords and tenants if you're taking the property management route. So in sales with buyers and sellers, one of the very early things that we need to do when it comes to agency is disclose our agency status. Now let's all go ahead and understand, working with real estate agents disclosure is not a client form. The working with real estate agent disclosure is a consumer form. We're having these conversations long before you become my client. If you're my client and I haven't done this, then it's too late. The whole point of the working with real estate agent disclosure is for me to disclose my agency status. Let's understand, the disclosure is not a contract. The disclosure does not create agency. The disclosure is me telling the consumer, this is who I represent in this transaction. This is where my loyalty is in this transaction. This is who I stand beside in this transaction. And it's only fair that we kind of warn the consumer going into this transaction of where I stand. It's not fair to let people assume. It's not fair to let people guess. This is our job to explain and let them know where we stand. So a couple of things about our disclosure. It applies to sales transactions only. I'm going to say this first bullet point is kind of a problem topic. I hate to say that your test likes to trick you, but let's be honest. Does your test like to trick you? They want to make sure that you have a full understanding here, right? So if you're reading an answer choice, for example, and it says the working with real estate agent disclosure applies to all real estate transactions. Is that true or false? Is that true? Does it apply to all?
No.
No, because it's not going to apply to lease transactions, for rent transactions. So working with real estate agent disclosures for sales transactions. It's when we're talking to a potential buyer or seller, not landlord or tenant. You guys, please, when you're reading test questions and the answer choices, I need you to read every single word. Every single word. Have you guys done enough practice questions to know that one word can change the meaning of the whole thing? And if you skip that word, you know, game over. So please read every word and make sure you're paying attention, especially to some of those absolute words like all, must, never, always. Those words have a pretty big impact. When we do our working with real estate agent disclosure, handing them, the consumer, the disclosure is not enough. I can't just say, here's my disclosure, I need you to sign this. We need to have a conversation with them about it. We need to explain it to them. We need to make sure that they understand, again, where I stand. And I think the most important thing about the disclosure is letting the consumer know that I do not owe you confidentiality until and if you decide to hire me. Isn't that fair that a consumer know that? Be very careful about what you tell me. And let's have this conversation with them up front so they understand the only time you get confidentiality from me is if you decide to hire me. If you never hire me, I don't owe you that. I tend to think of the disclosure as we're Mirandaizing the consumers. Have we seen enough TV shows that we know the Miranda rights? I know we don't have firsthand experience on this, but have we seen enough TV shows and movies that we know what the Miranda rights are? What do they say in part? Anything you say can be held against you in this transaction. So handing it to them is not enough. Putting a link in your email signature saying click here and sign is not enough. We need to explain it. We need to have a conversation with the consumer so they understand. Pretty much anything that we sign, agency disclosure, agency contract, purchase and contract, is going to include our name and license number. Once you guys get your license, you'll get a 6-digit number. Go ahead and memorize that because you're going to need it everywhere you go. I often joke that the Real Estate Commission has no idea who Julie Campbell is, but I'm telling you, they know who 264172 is. So that's how they recognize us and identify us. Go ahead and memorize that number. And then this third bullet point, we have this duty to disclose our agency status no later than first substantial contact. So let's talk a little bit about this third bullet point. Who can tell me, and you're welcome to do so in a private chat or unmute yourself, whichever, who can tell me what you think of when you see the word substantial? What does the word substantial mean to you? I'm getting in the chat, meaningful. I would agree. Pretty much, if we're learning something substantial about the consumer, we're learning something that's about the consumer that's relevant to this transaction. I don't care what you had for lunch. I don't care if you like this property. We can talk about the property all day long. Conversation turns substantial when I start learning relevant information about the consumer, either them volunteering or me seeking it out. I cannot ask a lot of questions. How much are you willing to pay? What's your motive for buying or selling? What terms are you looking for? I cannot start asking a lot of questions without first revealing my agency status, doing my disclosure. The other piece of this is I need to be on alert for the consumer to start volunteering information. Have you guys ever had a random stranger come up to you in the store and just start sharing their life story? And you're like, wow, who is this? What? Guys, people talk. Blows my mind. People walk in the front door of your open house. Hi, my name is Julie, and I need to buy a house in 2 months, and this is my price point. I'm with bed. Okay, stop. Anytime we're acting in the capacity as an agent, we need to be on alert for that first substantial contact. Technically, commission rule says that we have a duty to do our agency disclosure before first substantial contact occurs. I would say in a perfect world, we could always hit this before first substantial contact. Let me ask you guys a question. Do we live in a perfect world? Not even a little bit. So I can't always be on alert, but I can't always stop that for first substantial contact, but I can be on alert. And if first substantial contact happens, I need to be able to say, I apologize. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before you continue, I have a duty to disclose to you that, for example, in this transaction, I represent the seller. Anything you share to me, I have a duty to take to my seller. That's why they hired me. You know, if I'm doing an open house on Sunday, a buyer walks in the front door, they say, hi, my name is Bob. I don't know anything substantial. Is that going to affect them in any way in this transaction? Probably not. And they can go through the whole open house or the whole home, and they can leave and they can say, thank you, Julie, have a good day. And I could say, bye, Bob. And Bob could get in his car and leave. And Bob and I have never hit first substantial contact. So meeting somebody is not first substantial contact. Again, what if Bob walked in the front door and said, I got to buy a house before St. Patrick's Day. I got to find something soon. This is my price point. I need to be prepared to say, Bob, I need you to stop talking. I need you to listen, because you need to understand, again, in this transaction, I represent the seller. I think one thing we're going to learn, you guys will learn when we get going in this industry, people love to talk about real estate. And once they find out you're an agent, they're going to ask you about the market. They're going to ask you, you know, what's going on, the current conditions. Talking about real estate in general isn't necessarily first substantial contact. Somebody looks at you and says, ooh, I want to buy a house. Well, everybody wants to buy a house. Even people that have a house want to buy a different house. It's not really hitting something substantial. Again, I always think of first substantial contact. Write this down, PTM, price, term, and motive. Price, term, and motive. Once we start learning, for example, how low the seller is willing to go or how high the buyer is willing to go, what are they willing to pay? Once we learn their motive, their reason for buying or selling, or once we learn any terms that they would find acceptable, that's when our little flag needs to go up. Again, if we haven't had the conversation yet, we need to stop them. I think this is hard for some of us to get. I don't know about you guys, but I was raised that you don't interrupt people when they're talking. I was raised that it was rude to interrupt people when they're talking. Anybody else same similar? Guys, this is one scenario. I hate to say this, and y'all do not repeat this. Mama was wrong. This is one case that it's rude. Y'all don't tell my mom I said that, okay? But this is one case that it's rude not to interrupt them. Put yourself in the consumer's shoes. And let's say you're Bob, and you come into my open house and you say, this is how much I'm willing to pay for a home. This is what I'm pre-approved for. This is how fast I need to buy, and these are terms that I need acceptable. And I stand there and patiently listen to you. And then I say, well, Bob, I appreciate you sharing that with me, but I have a duty to my seller, so I got to take all that to my seller if you bring an offer. Does Bob like me? Does Bob feel that he can trust me? No. Guys, this is what we need to be on alert for. So let's say Bob comes in and he says, I got to buy something in the next couple of months. I'm relocating here and my wife's pregnant and we just got to buy something as fast as we possibly can. Bob, please stop talking. Bob, I need you to understand this is where I stand. I represent the seller. What you share with me, I have a duty to share with my seller. You don't owe me confidentiality until and if you decide to hire me. And I go through my whole spiel, and we have Bob sign the disclosure. And then Bob says, okay, anyway, so as I was saying, this is my price point. This is my terms. This is what I find acceptable. Guys, I've done my job. If Bob wants to keep talking after that, then I need to whip out my notepad and my pen and start taking notes so I can make sure I get that information back. I can only warn Bob. I can only let Bob know, again, where I stand. If he continues to keep talking, then that's on Bob, as long as I've done my job and disclose that agency status. Let me ask you guys another question. I'm full of questions, by the way. So let me ask you guys another question. Can I make anybody do anything? Can I force the pen in Bob's hand and say, you are going to sign this, Bob? We can try to get them to sign the disclosure. We can explain it. We can hand them a Q&A brochure that explains working with real estate agents in North Carolina. I can't make Bob sign. If Bob refuses to sign my disclosure, then I'm actually going to write, Bob refused to sign on December 9th. And if Bob refuses to sign, does that mean I can't continue with Bob? Does that mean I can't work with Bob? I can't try to form a relationship with Bob? If Bob doesn't sign the disclosure, are Bob and I done? No, we can keep going. Again, you guys, disclosure does not create agency. Is that worth me saying again? The disclosure does not create agency. You guys tell me, what creates agency?
The listing agreement and the buyer agency agreement.
There you go. Our agency agreements, our listing agreement, our buyer agency agreement, that's what creates the agency. That's what makes me owe you old car. It's not the disclosure. I was showing one of my listing once. The lady called off the sign. I met her to show her the property. We were still in the driveway. I went ahead and did working with real estate agent disclosure because I thought once we get in the front door, we very well may turn into first substantial contact. So let me go ahead and knock this out. So I went through my elevator spiel and did my disclosure. And I said, please sign here, acknowledging receipt of the disclosure. And she looked at me and she said, I just met you. I'm not signing anything you give me. Fair enough. I get it. Consumers are protective. I mean, you guys are consumers too. Could you imagine going to the grocery store this afternoon and the manager runs up and says, you have to buy something if you walk in the front door? You know, we would be intimidated. We would be scared. So I, thanked her for her honesty. I wrote, refused to sign. I put the Q&A, the information in her hand, and then I proceeded to show her my listing. But I warned her, even though she didn't sign, that doesn't negate me doing my job. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, I think first substantial contact is most likely to happen when we are face to face. Maybe the scenario of the open house that we've been talking about. Maybe I'm meeting a potential seller on a listing appointment. Maybe I'm meeting a potential buyer at a buyer consultation appointment. Sometimes first substantial contact, though, can happen via phone or online. Could somebody call you and say, hi, my name is Bob, and this is how much I'm pre-approved for? Whoa, Bob, whoa, stop talking. Or could somebody email you or send you a message from your website and say, I need to buy something within the next 2 months, help, exclamation point? Sure. So we always need to be on alert for substantial contact, even if it's not face-to-face, even if it's not in person. So if first substantial contact happens via the phone or online, who can tell me how many days I have to get the disclosure to the consumer?
3.
That's right. Please note that says 3 days to get them the disclosure. even on the phone or replying to the email, I'm still going to disclose my agency status. Again, you guys, handing it to them or emailing it to them is not enough. So we're still having the conversation. Again, I think it comes down to just sense of urgency. You know, everybody's going to tell you they want to buy a house. Everybody's going to tell you they're thinking about selling one day. Some of you, when you join your firms, some of you may be encouraged to wear your name tag everywhere you go when you're out in public. Why would your firm want you to wear your name tag?
Possibly to expose yourself to the company, advertisement.
Yeah. Yeah. So they come up to you and start talking about real estate. So if you're in Harris Teeter and you have your name tag on and you're standing there deciding what kind of cereal you want this week, do you need to be on alert for first substantial contact? Do you need to be aware for somebody to come up to you in aisle 4 and go, ooh, you're an agent? Oh my gosh, we need to sell our house so fast and we want to buy in this neighborhood. So now here we are in Harris Teeter and boom, we hit first substantial contact. Now, I'm not going to lie. I don't carry these disclosures around in my purse or anything. I do have them in my trunk. They're not too far away. And of course I have my phone on me. So I may not be able to put it in their hand at Harris Teeter, but at least I can have the conversation. You guys with me? Anytime we're acting as a capacity of an agent, we need to be on alert. We need to listen and pay attention to what the consumer's telling us. My husband calls me a traveling billboard. If you ever get behind me in a stoplight, you'll know it. My back windshield has my name, my firm, the fact that I'm a real estate professional, phone number, and email address. Could first substantial contact happen for me in the Walmart parking lot? Yeah, because I'm driving all over town advertising the fact that I'm a real estate professional. So we're looking for that price, term, or motive. We're looking for that sense of urgency. We're listening and we're always on alert. We're always aware. Again, if we know it's going to happen, go ahead and do it. But we also need to be on alert. Do we have any questions on the working with real estate agent disclosure? I promise you, the first couple times you do your disclosure to the consumer, once you guys get your license, it's going to be bumpy. It's going to be awkward. It's going to come out something like, oh, disclosure, sign here. I promise you, the more you do it, the more you practice, the more you get through your elevator spiel, it will get better. I do not like role playing. I feel so dumb when I stand there and role play, but you know what? It works. It helps. So practice your disclosure in the mirror. Start with you. Practice your disclosure with your family, your friends. Get your spiel out. And I promise you, after a couple times, you'll be experts at this. So we've met the consumer. We've done our disclosure. And now we're going to move on and possibly try to create agency. Agency agreements are what create agency. Somebody mentioned our listing agreement, our buyer's agency agreement. We also have a property management agreement. Is anybody going into property management? A couple of you, maybe, not sure. Just get your license first. I hear you. I hear you. Julie, let me get my license and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do. I got you. So your possibilities are endless, right? So agency agreements, again, are what create agency. If you want to be my client, if you want me to give you OCAR, you've got to hire me. And how you hire me is by using an agency agreement. Is everybody good with the fact that the agency agreement is an employment contract? I'm being hired to do a very specific job. You're either hiring me to manage your property, you're hiring me to help you find a buyer and sell your property, or you're hiring me to help you locate and purchase a property. All employment contracts have got to discuss how I expect to be paid once I've done my job. We've got to have the conversation with the consumer. If you hire me and I do my job, this is when I expect to be paid and how much. Our agency agreements eventually need to be in writing and signed. Anytime you're working with an owner, either for sale or for rent, either a listing agreement or a property management agreement, those agency agreements must be in writing from the inception. I cannot perform a single service for the owner until I have a signed agency agreement. Commission rule allows me to work with a buyer and a tenant under an oral agency agreement at first. Now let's talk about this. The oral agency agreement is an express agreement. An express agreement means that the terms have been clearly stated. Express agreements can be in writing. They can also be oral. So if we're going to proceed under an oral buyer agency agreement, I can't just start acting like your agent without having the conversation with you. I'm not asking you to sign anything, but I have to explain to you what it means to be in an agency, an express agency agreement with me. I got to explain the duties. I got to tell you, talk to you about dual agency. We're still discussing the points of the written agreement. I'm just not asking you to sign anything yet. An oral buyer agency agreement is an agency agreement. Under an oral agreement, I owe that buyer old card. I want you guys to write something else down. Everybody ready? Write it real big. I don't think you'll be tested on this, but I think this is really important for your career. Everybody ready? Document everything. What are we going to document? Everything. So if I have a conversation with a buyer about an express oral agency agreement, and I say, this is what it means to be in an agency agreement, and these are the duties that I owe you, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Wouldn't it be advised that I go home and follow that conversation up with an email talking about per our conversation? So that way we have that documentation that we explained the status of the agency agreement, even though I'm not asking you to sign anything yet. We can work with a buyer under an oral agreement up until the time we're ready to present an offer. Again, this is another place where your test, I hate to say that they trick you, I really do, but let's be honest. Writing the offer and presenting the offer are two different things. If I'm writing up an offer on your behalf, I'm filling in the blanks. I'm asking, how much do you want to offer? What do you want your due diligence to be? What do you want your earnest money? When do you want to close? I'm actually filling in the blanks. Once I fill in the blanks of the offer on behalf of my buyer, I send it to them to sign, or I have them sign it wet signature, or I send it to them through an electronic means. Once I have the buyer's signature on that offer, then I contact either the listing agent or the seller if it's a for sale by owner. That's when I'm presenting my buyer's offer. And commission rule says I've got to have my oral buyer agency agreement reduced to writing no later than the time I'm ready to present an offer on their behalf. So we just said, under an oral buyer agency agreement, I owe them old card. Under an oral buyer agency agreement, what do they owe me?
A commission?
Not under an oral agreement.
They don't owe you nothing.
They owe me nothing. So why do I want to get this thing in writing before I present an offer on their behalf?
You get paid.
I want to get paid. The only way I can protect my commission is if I have this in writing. We cannot proceed under an oral agreement when we're to this point. Now, you know, some firms may require their agents to get all buyer's agency agreements in writing. Some of you may choose to conduct your business that way. I need you guys to understand, your tests are not going to ask you what you're going to do. Your tests are going to ask you what you can do. Can you proceed with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement until you're ready to present an offer on their behalf?
Yes.
And the answer is commission rule says yes, absolutely. There are a couple caveats to oral buyer agency. Oral buyer agency is non-exclusive. When we're talking about agency, that word exclusive means a whole lot. Let me ask you guys a question. If you're dating somebody exclusively, how many people should you be dating?
One.
One.
Just one. It's funny, I tend to get faster reactions from women. I get different answers from women than I do from men. But if you're dating somebody exclusively, we should only be dating one person. And in an agency agreement, exclusivity is a one-way street. So in other words, if we have an exclusive agreement with a buyer or seller, that buyer or seller is only allowed to date one firm. Now, the firm can date as many people as they want to, right? If I was a firm of 400 agents, we're not going to make a living if we could only have one listing at a time or one buyer at a time. So exclusivity is a one-way street. So if an oral buyer agency agreement is non-exclusive, how many firms can the buyer date?
As many as
they want.
They play the field, can't they? So we cannot, in an oral agreement, demand exclusivity. We cannot demand that exclusive relationship. If I want to demand exclusivity, then I got to get it in writing. The second kind of caveat to oral buyer agency, I cannot specify a period of time that we're going to work together. So in other words, under an oral agreement, I can't say you and I are going to go out for a month and try to find you a house. If I want to put a time frame on this relationship, I got to put it in writing. I need you guys with your test questions, I need you to pay attention to that word exclusive. If you're reading a question and you see that it is an exclusive buyer agency, it's in writing, because oral is non-exclusive. So we eventually get everything in writing and signed by all parties. We got some commission rules that talk about our written agency agreements must. There's our absolute word again, must, all, always, never. Our written agency agreements must be for a definite period of time. We need to put an expiration date in there. When they're over, they're over. If our agency agreement is up, what is it, December 9th, our listing agreement, our buyer's agency agreement actually says at 11:59 p.m., we're done. And after our agency agreement is over, I don't know you old car anymore. Can we agree to extend it? If our agency agreement's expiring today, can we agree to extend it? Of course we can. Absolutely, of course we can. But if we don't extend it when it's over, it's over. They've got to be for a definite period of time. There's our license number again. Again, you guys, pretty much everything you sign is going to have that license number. Put it on a flashcard if you have to, but go ahead and memorize that number once you get it. And then all of our agency agreements have the non-discrimination clause, saying we will not discriminate against the protected classes as listed by Fair Housing. So I have this image here of an airplane to help us better understand, differentiate between the client and the customer. I've actually borrowed this from my mentor. She knows I use her airplane. Let's say you're the pilot of this plane. You were the agent of the pilot of this plane, and you're flying this plane throughout the transaction. We're going to put our clients in first class. We're going to put our customers in coach. Is everybody getting from point A to point B at the same time? Is it my job to get this plane from point A to point B? Yeah, that's what we do. Work through the transaction. The difference is the level of service that they receive in between. I've heard that first class is really nice. I hear you get a warm towel, maybe a nice meal, some champagne. What do we get back in coach? Some unsalted pretzels and lukewarm Coca-Cola, right? It's a different experience, isn't it? And that's what we're offering the consumer. You want to arrive, you want to fly first class? Enter into this agency agreement with me. You're okay with coach? Enjoy your lukewarm Coca-Cola. My clients get old car. My customers get honesty, fairness, and the disclosure of material facts. We're going to talk about material facts in a bit. We always have a duty to disclose material facts. I don't care who you are. Are you my client? Are you my customer? We always have a duty to disclose material facts. I don't care who I am. Am I the listing agent? Am I the buyer's agent? Am I a dual agent? Am I a designated dual agent? Am I a seller sub-agent? We always have a duty to disclose material facts. So I mentioned when we first got started, if you're just joining us, I'm recording, and later this afternoon or later this evening, I'll send you guys an email with the recording. I'll also send you my PowerPoint, so you'll have these as well. But I also have a little quiz that I'm going to send you guys as well. So if I don't have your email address in a private chat, please do so. I don't know how to find you guys. So if you want the email with all this information, make sure I have your email address. So the quiz that I'm going to send you is embedded in the PowerPoint, but when you look at the PowerPoint, you're going to see the answers. So I've taken those questions and I've kind of given them their own separate, so you can take it like a true quiz. So we're getting ready to put a question up on the screen for you guys. And I would like you all to respond to me in a private chat. Let's go ahead and set your chat to private. I asked for private for a couple reasons. First off, I don't want you to be afraid to answer and get it wrong. When you share something with me in a private chat, this is just between me and you. And the second reason I asked for a private chat is because I know some of you will sit there and wait and see what everybody else says and say, oh yeah, my answer is B too. And that doesn't help you. That's not how you learn. So does everybody have your private chat set to me, just to me? Everybody good? Okay. So in a private chat, tell me A, B, C, or D. Give me about 30 more seconds and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So when you guys see a test question, both for practice and of course for real on your exams, I sometimes feel like my job is twofold. One, to provide you guys the information you need to get through your test and help build the foundation for your career. The second fold is helping you interpret these dang test questions. Are some of these tricky? Yeah. So when you guys see a test question, the very first thing I want you to do is just read it. Just read the question. Again, you guys, the one word can change the meaning of everything. I need you to read the questions and all the answers before you answer. What you're looking for is the best answer. Does that mean you could have another good answer? I need you to answer the best. So if you read A and you like A, don't answer A. Read B, C, and D and make sure that A is the best. Everybody with me? I need you to read everything and find the best. So we see a test question. This one says a broker with ABC Realty meets a buyer to review their working with real estate agent disclosure. The buyer listens but refuses to sign the disclosure. Which of the following is true? I can proceed. I can keep going. I'm just going to make a note that says they refuse to sign. This isn't the end. It's not like, oh, well, you're not going to sign this and you can't work with me. Again, the disclosure does not create agency. I'm just disclosing my status. So even if they refuse to sign, I still disclosed my status. I still had the conversation. The only thing they're signing on the disclosure is acknowledgement of receipt of the disclosure. Does this make sense? So as long as I've done my job and still disclosed, I can't make them sign. Do you have any questions on this? Okay. That was fun. Let's do another one. Private chat, A, B, C, or D. Give about 30 more seconds. So this one says, a buyer agrees to be exclusively represented by a broker affiliated with XYZ Realty. Stop. Do we see our key word in this question? What's that key word? I can see your mouth.
Exclusively.
Exclusively. What does that tell me? Is this oral?
No.
No, it's in writing.
It's in writing. The buyer can only date one firm. So if the buyer agrees to only date one firm, an exclusive buyer agency agreement must be in writing once the buyers agreed to work only with broker XYZ. I cannot demand exclusivity in an oral agreement. If you demand exclusivity, you got to get it in writing. Questions? So let's talk a little bit about dual agency. In just a second, we'll take this a step further and talk about designated dual agency. But let's start with dual because that's where it starts. And first off, let me offer you, and I can't talk and type at the same time, so bear with me just a second. The simplest definition of dual agency that I can give you. Dual agency is one firm, one transaction, two clients. Maybe it's one broker working with the buyer and the seller. Maybe it's two brokers within the firm, one working with the buyer, one working with the seller. So first off, let's back up for a second. The consumer, the client, I should say, the client hires the firm. Everybody with me so far? We all run around, and you will do it too, talking about my buyer and my seller. But that's not accurate, is it? It's not my buyer. It's the firm's buyer. The firm allows me to work with their buyer. It's the firm's seller. The firm allows me to work with their seller. So the seller has hired the firm to sell 123 Main Street. The buyer has hired the same firm and now wants to purchase 123 Main Street. One firm, one transaction, two clients. That's not the only possible scenario, guys. I think that's where our mind tends to go. But there's another scenario. Buyer hires the firm to find them a property, and then later, the seller hires the firm that the buyer becomes interested in. Please don't think that the seller always comes first. Sometimes we have the buyer, and is everybody with me? Sometimes we have the buyer, a new listing hits the market, your buyer calls you and says, ooh, I like this listing your firm just put on the market this morning. Now we're in the potential for dual agency. This can work both ways. One firm, one transaction, two clients. Some firms have multiple locations. We have firms in the Triad, for example, that have a location in High Point, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem. Guess what? We're all still with the same firm. It's not about the roof. It's about the firm. Dual agency is for, like we said, one firm. It's an in-house transaction. In-house means we're all in the same firm. And in order for us to proceed as a dual agent, we have to have informed written consent by both parties. I'm going to say that again. In order for us to be able to do dual agency, we have to have informed written consent of both parties. So let's break this down. Informed. Does that mean I'm going to look at my buyer or seller and say, we're going to do dual sign here? Just sign it. It's fine. It'll be all right. Is that informing the consumer about what it means to be a dual agent? No, we're going to have a conversation about it. We're going to inform them about what it means. Both our listing agreement and our buyer's agency agreement give us the opportunity to explain dual agent to the seller and the buyer as it relates to them. Now, don't sit there and read it to the consumer. You guys are going to be familiar enough with your agency agreements that you can have these conversations without reading. But they need to understand, if they agree to dual agency, what they're agreeing to. So let's start with the seller. You're at your listing appointment. You're getting the seller to sign the agency agreement, and the conversation of dual agency comes up. And you explain what this means. And you tell the seller, if a buyer client from my firm becomes interested in your property, then we're in dual agency. And we'll talk more about that, what that means in just a second. So bear with me, please. And you explain this to your seller, and your seller quite rightfully says, I don't like the sound of this. I'm hiring you to be my advocate. I'm hiring you to stand by me in this transaction. And now you're telling me that there could be a scenario where you have to take a few steps back. You're telling me that there could be a scenario where you can't be my advocate. You can't offer me advice. The seller could rightfully say no to dual agency. If the seller says no to dual agency, they need to understand what they're saying no to is that no agent in my firm can bring their buyer client. If they say no, no agent in the firm can bring their buyer client. Can we bring our buyer customer? Yeah.
Yes.
Can another firm bring their buyer client? Sure. ABC, for example, Realty can't. So let's say you're a firm. Some of these firms got like 400, 500, 600 agents. So the seller needs to understand that if you say no, there's like 600 agents right there that can't bring their buyer client. Is the seller going to change their mind? I mean, maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. Let's switch that. Now you're working with the buyer. You're going over your agency agreement express, may it be in writing or oral. And you look at your buyer and you explain dual agency. And they say, no, I don't like the sounds of this. And you say, great. You need to understand, buyer, if you say no to dual agency, you can't see any listings that my firm has. You're saying no to seeing any of those properties. If either party says no from the onset, please know they can always change their mind, right? We just have to revisit this conversation. We got to edit our listing agreement, initial through it, date it, have everybody date it. But they need to, that's part of that informed consent. So I mentioned a few minutes ago about getting into dual agency and us not being able to advocate for the client, us not being able to offer advice. Do I have any football fans on the call? A couple of you. I'm actually a baseball gal, but I know enough about football because that's my dad's life. So that's what I grew up with. So let's pretend that we're watching a football game. When you're watching a football game, is it clear that there are two teams on the field? Can you, if you know nothing about football, can you look at the field and go, wow, there are two different teams. There's somebody in their away whites and there's somebody in their home, and I'm sorry, their home whites and their away grays. So it's pretty clear when you look at the field. Let's call one of those teams the seller and another one of those teams the buyer. Don't they have two different objectives? Don't they have two determinations, two reasons for being there? So the buyer and the seller are playing each other in this game, if you will. They hire you to be their agent. And as their exclusive agent, exclusive representation, you come on and you are their coach. And you are standing on the sidelines and you are shouting advice and you're making suggestions about what they should do. If we agree to enter into this dual agency scenario, my role changes. The buyer's still buying and the seller's still selling. They are the same. But now that we're in dual agency, my role changes. I cannot be a coach in dual agency. When we go into dual agency, I become the referee. Is the referee still part of the game? Is the referee still an important part of the game? Are they still involved? Are they still there helping everybody get through the game? Absolutely. Is the referee telling the quarterback what play they should make next? I hope not. The referee can't give advice. They're just making sure that everybody's following. Please understand, if you're in dual agency, exclusivity goes away because now you're representing both teams fairly and equally. And that's what the consumer needs to, or the consumer will say needs to understand. If you say no to dual, this is what you're saying no to. Can't see my firm's listings, or I can't show a buyer client your listing. And my role changes, my advocacy goes away. Guys, there is no piece of advice that I can offer the buyer that won't harm the seller in this transaction. There's no piece of advice I can offer the seller that won't harm the buyer in this transaction. I think dual agency is really hard for us to wrap our brains around because for my class, I always ask you guys for an introduction. I love to meet you on the first day. And one thing I hear, the common thing that I hear on the first day of pre-licensing is I'm here because I want to help people. I'm here because I want to help them achieve their dreams of home ownership. And I think that's quite admirable. And I think that's a great reason to be here. And then we start babbling on about this dual agency thing. And you find out there may be a time that I can't give you my full advocacy. I can't give you that exclusivity. And that's why I think this is so hard to understand. But I always need you guys to stop and ask, who does the firm represent? It's not about me, the individual broker. It's about the firm. Undisclosed dual agency is never allowed. We can't just start proceeding as a dual agency, as a dual agent, without first getting that informed written consent. We have to have that conversation. So with that being said, I'm out of coffee. So let's take a break. I do want to honor the breaks. I think we all need to stop staring at the screen for just a second. So let's take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how we could possibly take dual agency a step further, and we'll discuss designated dual agency. So here's 10, and I'll see you back in just a few minutes.
Hey, Angela. Hey, Jacqueline.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Like, this is so awkward because I'd be talking to this phone.
How are y'all doing this morning?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Going blind, doing all the studying.
Right, doing
Yeah.
good.
That's good. That's good. It's good to see y'all face this morning. Y'all ready?
I hope this is gonna help a lot for this midterm that we have tomorrow.
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
I've been at every single one of these study sessions. I'm not playing. I need to try to get a good score.
That part.
I know that's right.
All right. That's right. You guys are our first in-person class in almost 3 years. So that gives me hope for next year. I miss being in front of you. So you guys probably miss each other today. Can only see each other in this little box like this big. So it looks like
We'll see each other tomorrow.
Tomorrow, that's right. You can save it all up. Tatiana, are you and Jacqueline in the same? You got
we're
either
right
that or you got the
next to each
same.
other.
Oh, look, there you are. That's cute.
We study here every
the same
day.
virtual background.
Yeah, we study here, and we're like, we might as well.
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
That we study here every day, and then we were like, we might as well be here for the Cram Course, and I was like, yeah, you're right.
Well, good. Do I have any questions on dual agency before we take this a step further?
I have a question. So with dual agency, can the person say they're only willing to do exclusive agency? Like that's what they would put down?
They can say no to dual. Yep. So that's a great question. Thank you, iPhone. So our agency agreements, that's how you show up to me. So our agency agreements, when we talk about dual agency, there's a place, both sellers and buyers, both agreements. The sellers and buyers have a choice. They either agree to dual agency or it says they demand exclusive representation the whole time and decline dual agency. So they actually have to initial basically yes to dual or no to dual. And if they say no to dual, then again, the firm can't bring the other client. It could be a customer, it could be a client by another firm. But what they're saying is if they say no, they're saying that they demand that exclusivity.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is it typical for like, or is it common, I guess, for the seller to be like, no? I mean, because what would you tell the other, the other buyers like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't show you this house because the seller, you know?
Exactly what we would have to say. So is it common? I don't have stats, right? I don't know. I do know sometimes seller says no. I need you guys to understand. Has anybody been following the real estate market for the last 2 years? And homes have been flying off the shelf in less than 12 hours. And there's like 20 offers that come in within the first hour and a half and nobody ever says,
yeah.
That's not typical with real estate. Let's everybody understand that. That's not normal. So we're seeing that pendulum swing back and we're seeing it coming back to a more neutral market. At one point, we're going to be back in a buyer's market. You know, keep in mind, real estate's a market. I always think of that pendulum, and that pendulum is constantly swinging. So 2 years ago, we were like way up here in a seller's market, and we're seeing that pendulum come down. It's still a pretty strong seller's market, but it's not like what it's been the last couple of years. We're going to see that pendulum come back. So there's going to be a time where the seller lists their home, and that might be on the market for 4, 5, 6 or more months before we get a buyer. So let's talk about that market. You enter into this listing agreement and the seller says, no, I'm not doing dual agency. Fast forward 6 months and we haven't had a serious buyer. We haven't had any offers. And all of a sudden, a buyer client from your firm is interested in seeing the property. This is what I mean. We can always revisit it. We can always, if I went back to the seller after 6 months and be like, look, I know you said no to dual, but I got a client, I got a buyer client in my firm that's interested in seeing it. Would you consider changing your mind? After 6 months, do you think the seller may be more apt to change their mind than what they were on day one, knowing, for example, they're not going to be on the market for longer than 12 hours? So that's what we mean by they can always change their mind. We just need to revisit it. And 6 months from now or 2 days from now, when a buyer client's interested, we just go and say, look, somebody from my firm, you said no to dual, but I want you to know that somebody's now interested in this property. Would you consider? And I think after 6 months, for example, they're going to be more likely to change their mind. Does that make sense? Same thing with the buyer. You know, if they say no, and then they've been looking at homes for weeks, months, maybe longer, and then all of a sudden their dream house comes on the market, but it's listed by your firm, is it worth revisiting for them so we can have the opportunity just to get them in the front door? I mean, this is all I'm asking, is just to get them in the front door for the showing. So guys, always keep that in mind. We can revisit, people can change their minds, but it's our job. If I explain it on day one, I may need to explain it again on month 6. Does that make sense? Make sure they always understand what they're agreeing to or what they're changing their minds to. Good questions. Thank you. I joke with my post-licensing students, you know, they've just gotten their license within the last 18 months or so, give or take, less than that. And I joke with them that are in the business. If you've been at it for this last 2 years, you have no idea how to sell a house. Because let's face it, all you've had to do is put a for sale sign in the front yard and the dang thing sells itself. Even if you have to do that, I mean, homes were selling off market. But now we're getting back into advertising and marketing and open houses, and we're getting back into selling homes again. So we talked about dual agency. So let's take this a step further and let's talk about designated dual agency. Let's understand a few things about designated dual agency right out the gate. Designated dual agency is a form of dual agency. Everybody see that? Designated dual agency. In order for us to do designated dual agency, first off, the firm has to allow it. Let's all understand, not all firms may allow designated dual agency. They should have a policy in place about how this is going to be practiced. This is not automatic. The firm has to have that in place. The firm has to say, yeah, we're going to do dual and this is or designated, and this is how we're going to do it. The other thing out the gate, designated dual agency is one firm, one transaction, 2 clients. Designated is always 2 brokers. So in designated dual agency, we have yes to dual. I cannot do designated if I don't have 2 yeses to dual. So if everybody on board with dual, and if the firm allows it, then we agree to take it a step further and offer designated. And in designated dual agency, one agent is going to be designated to work exclusively with the buyer, and a different agent is going to be designated to work exclusively with the, who did I say first? Buyer. The second one with the seller. Exclusivity comes back in designated for the agents. This is important. The firm and all the other agents in the firm remain in dual. It's just one agent has been designated to work exclusively with the seller, and a different agent has been designated to work exclusively with the buyer. Let's go back to our football scenario for a second. In dual agency, my role changed, didn't it? I went from being the coach to the referee. Once I'm designated, I get to go back to being a coach. Now I'm back on the sidelines, shouting advice, giving orders. Guys, once the two agents have been designated, those two might as well proceed as if they were with two different firms. Exclusivity comes back. Again, the firm's still in dual. They're still loyal and representing both parties. They're still acting as the referee. It's the individual broker that's been designated, one to work exclusively with the seller and a different one to work exclusively with the buyer. Is designated better for the buyer and seller? Is this a better deal? Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. This is what they thought they were signing up for to begin with, right? Again, until we started babbling on about dual agency and how I can't give you advice or advocacy. So absolutely designated is what's best for the buyer and seller. Again, though, you guys, it's got to be allowed by the firm. The firm has to have a policy. One man show, a sole practitioner. How many people work for a sole practitioner? Sole means
one person.
Just one. Can a sole practitioner offer designated dual agency?
No.
No, because how many brokers do I need?
Two.
What if we were a very small firm? What if it was just 5 of us and we did everything together? Could we reasonably offer designated dual agency? I mean, we're together all the time. We do everything together. I guess we could, but it could get tricky here, right? Here's a couple caveats to designated dual agency. The first caveat to designated, you can't be designated if you have received prior confidential information about the other team. If you know anything about the other team or the other side in this transaction, you can't be designated. Your BIC should have a policy in place about how they're going to designate. They should actually look at you and say, Julie, you've been working with the buyer, but do you know anything about my seller that can harm them in this transaction? And then they need to have that conversation with the other agent as well. So we can only be designated if we have not received prior confidential information about the other team, about the other party. Guys, once you're designated, you're exclusive now. So once you're designated, if you learn something confidential, you have a duty to your client to tell them. Again, once you're designated, you might as well proceed as if you're 2 different firms. So you've been designated, you're the buyer's agent, you've been designated, you find out something about the seller, about this transaction. You owe that to your buyer to share that with them. But you can't have prior confidential information. That's one caveat. The other caveat is that the provisional broker and the broker in charge can never, there's an absolute word there, can never be designated opposite of each other. The provisional broker, soon to be you guys, and the broker in charge can never be designated opposite each other. And here's why. As a provisional broker, your broker in charge should be in your back pocket. They should be with you at listing appointments. They should be advising you through buyer consultations, right? I tend to call my provisional brokers with training wheels. Like as a PB, you can ride your bike, but you can't do it without the assistance of your training wheels. Let's call your BIC the training wheels. They're there to assist you and walk you through. Just the very nature of the relationship. Shouldn't the BIC know something about your client? Because they've been, if they're not with you at the appointment, they're going, Julie, how did it go this afternoon? So just the very nature of that relationship, the BIC should know something about the provisional broker's client. Any other relationship is allowed. The BIC can be designated opposite of a broker. A broker can be designated opposite of a provisional broker. Any other relationship is allowed as long as you haven't received prior confidential information about the other team. I'm going to say that this, the PB and the BIC thing, is probably one of the bigger problem topics of dual and designated agency. So let's make sure we're super good on this. Let me ask you guys a question. Why don't you guys answer me in a private chat? I'd like to hear from all of you in a private chat. Can the provisional broker and the broker in charge be dual agents? And you can tell me Y or N. I know what you mean. Can the BIC and the PB be dual agents? BIC and PB, can they be dual? And the answer is yes, they can be dual. They cannot be designated. There's two different things going on. There's dual agency and then there's designated. Remember, everybody's a dual agent. Once the buyer and the seller have hired the same firm for the same transaction, all 600 of us with the same firm, or all 5 of us with the same firm, or just me as a sole practitioner is a dual agent. The PB and the BIC can't be designated. They cannot be opposite of each other. Again, the BIC should know, if they're doing their job, they should know something about the PB's clients. What questions do I have about that? Okay. Well, I got a question for you guys. Private chat, tell me in a private chat, A, B, C, or D. About 30 more seconds. We'll talk about it. Okay. So this one says all the following situations may result in dual agency except. All right, hang on. Let's first have a conversation about this. I don't know about you guys. And I'll tell you right now, I hate the word hate But you know what? I hate these except questions. It's like going against what our brain wants us to do. So let's back up for a second and talk about what's going on. If you guys ever get stuck with a question and you can't, oh, what do I do? What do I do? One strategy to consider is to look at A, B, C, or D, treat each one independently, and answer A, B, C, or D, true or false. So at the end, if you say, is A true or false? Is B true or false? C, D. At the end, you're going to have either 3 trues and 1 false, or 3 falses and 1 true. With these except questions, we're looking for 3 trues and 1 false. So in other words, the reason that this answer is right is because it's wrong. So once we get our brain to adjust to that, so consider with the except, is A true or false, is B, C, D, and then that can help you figure out which one is the odd man out. That's what we're looking for here, is that odd man out. So all of the following situations may, does that mean they definitely will? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. All of the following situations may result in dual agency, except the listing agent that writes up the offer for the buyer that is not working with another broker and does not desire representation. This buyer doesn't want to be a client. This buyer doesn't want exclusivity. They want to go through the transaction alone. And remember, back up to the simplest form of dual agency I can give you. 1 firm, 1 transaction, and how many clients? Always, always 2. If anybody is the customer, we don't have dual. Both buyer and seller are represented by the firm. So the other ones may, I'm not telling you they are or not, I don't know, may result in dual agency, but B can't, because the buyer said, no, I'm good. I don't need to hire you. I'm okay with being your customer. That's what we mean by does not desire. They're either represented or they're unrepresented. Questions? Let's see. I think I'm just going to skip that one for now. Again, if I have your email address, I'm sending you all this recording, PowerPoints, and this little quiz. So just make sure I have your email address in a private chat. I'll get that to you guys later. You know, probably my goal would be before you sit down to eat dinner tonight, but you know, if not, before you go to bed for sure. Get it to you as soon as I can is my point. Thank you. So let's switch gears just a bit. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about some material facts. And first off, let's take a few steps back. The general definition of material facts is very broad. The broad definition of material facts is anything that a relevant party, that a party would find relevant, there we go, in this transaction. What the heck does that mean, right? Do you find something important that I may not? This could be subjective, right? So the big broad definition of material facts is not helpful whatsoever. So the Real Estate Commission has helped us out, and they've given us specifics, things that are specifically material facts. Something that is specifically a material fact is a fact about the property itself. Structural issues, the roof leaks, the basement floods, termite damage. Anything that could affect the property itself. A material fact is also something relating directly to the property. A pending zoning amendment, redrawing of the school lines, the school board lines, a proposed highway project. Maybe we're going to take this 2-lane road and NCDOT is going to make it a 5-lane road or 4-lane road with a median. So anything relating directly to the property. It's not about the property, but it affects the property or could affect the property. I think this third one is the hardest one for us to wrap our brains around. A material fact is any fact relating directly to the ability of your principal to complete the transaction. Hold up. Didn't we decide in OLCAR that I owe you confidentiality? Didn't we decide that what you share with me, I can't share with others unless I have your written permission? Except if you are unable to complete the transaction. The other party has the right to know that you are unable to complete the transaction. Generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, this third bullet point tends to revolve around money. So if we find out your buyer can't get loan approval, that's a material fact that we have to disclose to the seller. What if we find out once we're under contract that your seller is going into bankruptcy or foreclosure? That's a material fact that we have to reveal. So I owe my client confidentiality unless they become unable to complete the transaction. That's a material fact that I have to disclose. This fourth one is not a material fact to the consumer. This fourth one is material fact for me, the agent. I tend to operate by a pretty simple philosophy. If it's important to my buyer, then it's important to me. If it's important to my seller, then it's important to me. If my client shares something of importance, then it becomes important to me. It becomes a material fact to me. And once I know this something of importance, then I have a duty to make sure that their end use can be met. What if, for example, my buyer tells me they want, once they buy, they want to convert the garage into a hair salon. I now have a material fact on my hand to make sure zoning allows it. If it's in an owner's association, to make sure covenants allow it. Everybody with me? I can't just say, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. You'll be all right. I now have a duty to make sure that their end use can be met because they're shared something of importance to me. I had a seller once. Let's flip this coin. I had a seller once, and I'm not going to lie, the man about drove me nuts. His answer to every single thing I asked him was, I don't care as long as I make X amount. Said, hey, what do you want to list your house for? I don't care as long as I make X amount. You going to leave the fridge? I don't care as long as I make X amount. We got an offer. You want to accept it or counter it? I don't care as long as I make it. I'm like, dude, I'm going to need an answer for you. But what was he telling me? He was telling me something that was of specific importance to him. He genuinely didn't care as long as he made X amount. Did I have a material fact on my hand as his agent to make sure that at the end of the transaction, I put a check for X amount into his hand? You better believe it. I overestimated all of his costs because it was that important to him that he got X amount. Does this make sense? If it's important to them, then it's important to me. Again, I didn't tell every buyer, well, we don't care what you offer as long as he makes X amount. It was a material fact to me, not to everybody else. Does this make sense? We got to listen first. Y'all listen to buyers and sellers, but two, ask questions. You know, when you're out showing your buyers properties, they're going through the home and looking for specific things. Pay attention, see what they're looking for. Help you learn those specific importance so we can help them get their end use or their end means can be met. As we said earlier, the first three, I always have a duty to disclose material facts. Again, I think what's hard for us to understand, the first three bullet points here are duties that I owe to everybody. I don't care if you're my client or my customer. Who can remind me what caveat emptor means?
Buyer beware.
Buyer beware. Caveat emptor applies to the seller. You and I cannot hide behind caveat emptor. Remember what part of Old Car says. Old Car says, I'm going to follow my client's lawful instructions. Client cannot make me violate license law or commission rule. So when your seller, you're getting ready to list this home for sale, and your seller looks at you and says, the roof leaks, shh, don't tell anybody. Can I follow my client's lawful instructions? Can I say, well, that's what you instructed me to. So this is a conversation we need to have with our sellers early, like before we go through the home and give them the opportunity to point out all the problems. They need to understand that they have every right to say no representation. You and I, under license law and commission rule, have a duty to always disclose material facts, regardless of how they complete the seller disclosures. And how do we protect the sellers? We have this conversation early. Don't go through, make the house and make notes of all the problems and then say, well, I got to tell everybody. Have these conversations early. Let the seller understand our obligations under our license law and commission rule. So if these are things that are material facts, let's talk about things in North Carolina that are not material facts. The stigmatized property is not a material fact. If there was death or serious illness of the previous occupant, I don't have to volunteer that information. I don't have to disclose it. If I'm asked, I can't lie. If I know, I give my honest answer. If I don't know, maybe I don't know is my honest answer. But we don't have to volunteer the information. We don't have to advertise it. Guys, you don't have to work with many buyers. You won't have many showings before a buyer will walk in a front door, turn around, look at you and say, did anybody ever die in this house? I'm going to say that's a very common question. And I need you to be careful about how you answer that. Let's pretend that you know the sellers. What the heck? Maybe they're family. Maybe you're selling a home for your family. And you know for sure that nobody in that household died. But do you know the house's history? Do you know about the previous owner and the owner before that and the owner before that? They're not asking you if anybody on the deed died. They're asking you if anybody ever died in this house. And unless you know for sure, do not say yes or no. Everybody with me? What's the exception to this rule? There's one exception to this rule. Anybody want to venture a guess?
What's the question?
HIV, protected class of HIV.
That's right. The question was the exception to this rule. And thank you, William. If you're ever asked, did anybody ever live in this home that had AIDS or HIV?
Yeah.
Your answer is always federal fair housing prohibits me from answering that. I don't care if you know or not. Federal fair housing prohibits me from answering that because those with AIDS or HIV are protected under the handicap disability status of fair housing. Now, I always get asked, have you ever been asked that? No, I personally have never been asked that. But you know what? If I am, I know how to respond. And that's what we're doing. We're making sure you guys know how to respond to that question. Anybody ever live in this house that has AIDS or HIV? Federal fair housing, did y'all write that down? Federal fair housing prohibits me from answering that. Have you guys made it to Unit 19 yet? Protected classes? Probably something you have to look forward to this weekend. It's closer to the end. The other thing that's not a material fact in North Carolina is if anybody that lives nearby that has been convicted sex offender, again, I don't have to volunteer the information. I can choose to disclose it, but I don't have to volunteer. And if I'm asked, I still can't lie. We can never lie. When it comes to this one, I mean, let's face it, this is probably buyers that are asking or tenants that are asking this question. Does a convicted sex offender live nearby? And when it comes to this, I'm a big fan of being the source of the source. What do I mean by that?
Tell them to look it up.
That's right. I'm going to direct them to the North Carolina Sex Offender Registry website and let them do their own research. I'm going to give them the source so they can look it up. I think that's the best thing we can do. Let's keep in mind a couple things here. First off, this word says convicted. Unfortunately, not all sex offenders have been caught and convicted yet, have they? So before you say, no, there's no sex offenders that live by, you may not know. They just may not have been caught yet. The other thing that we need to be aware of, sex offenders can and do move. Megan's Law requires them to update their address with the Sex Offender Registry website. But just because a convicted sex offender, or a sex offender for that matter, doesn't live next door today, doesn't mean one can't move in tomorrow. Everybody with me? So by giving them that source, they can keep an eye on their neighborhood. They can check it before they buy. Maybe they check it after they buy, right? Particularly if they have kids. I mean, I think bottom line, let's know who our kids are with and what they're doing, especially if you're new to the neighborhood. But, you know, be the source of the source. Give them the resource that they need to find that information. If you're a listing agent and your sellers share that there's a convicted sex offender nearby, then we have a conversation with our sellers. Do you want to disclose this? Is this information that you want to share? I took a CE class, it was before the pandemic, we were in person. And the gentleman shared that exact scenario with us. He was at a listing appointment. The seller said, there's a convicted sex offender across the street. What do we do? And the agent had the conversation. And at the end of the day, the seller chose to disclose that. Isn't that admirable? Isn't that honorable? Because they themselves had young children. And they said, if we were buying this home, we would want to know ourselves. But they had the conversation. The sellers made that decision. Oh, let's see. Questions on material facts. I think I'm going to skip these. By the way, again, if you're just joining us, welcome. All my PowerPoints, quiz, and recording, I'm happy to email to you this afternoon as long as I have your email address in a private chat. So if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoints, a copy of the recording, and these quizzes that we're seeing, please just make sure I have your email in a private chat. Okay, so when we first started, I mentioned that units 7 and 8 were heavily tested. You guys have that at the beginning of your notes. 7 and 8 are basically agency. 2 other heavily tested units are 9 and 10. 7, 8, 9, and 10. 9 and 10 are about our contracts. 9 is our law school 101, rapid fire. 10 is more specific about our standard offer to purchase and contract and contract procedures, such as submitting offers to sellers, dealing with multiple offers, etc. So let's talk about sales contract. Particularly, let's talk about our standard offer to purchase and contract, standard form 2T. The North Carolina Bar Association got together with the North Carolina Association of Realtors, and they created all the pre-printed forms that we are allowed to use. One of them being the offer to purchase and contract, all the addenda and amendments that go with it. Other forms they provide us, pre-printed forms that they provide us, are our agency agreements. So we have these pre-printed forms that they allow us to use as long as you're a realtor. As long as you're a member of the National Association of Realtor, that's gets you into the state level, which is NCAR. Your firm, your BIC, worry about all that once you get your license and you affiliate. So once you're a realtor, you have these forms available to use. All we can do is fill in the blanks. I can't draft, I can't add, I can't delete, even at the instruction of my client. Again, you guys, remember what we said very early? It's not my buyers and sellers' job to know the parameters of my job, what I can and can't do. It's my job to know the parameters of my job. So might a buyer ask you to insert verbiage into a contract? You never know. We need to be prepared how to answer that. All I can do with our pre-printed forms provided by NCAR, all we can do is fill in the blanks. And the blanks are asking for a very specific thing. Just because we see a blank doesn't mean we can put any old information in there. The blanks are asking for something very specific. And we need to make sure that we're competently performing and completing these forms. Another pretty simple philosophy that I work by, when in doubt, find out. So if I don't know what should go in a blank, there are resources out there for me. A lot of our forms have guidelines to complete. Sometimes you may go to your BIC. I'll share this with you guys, just FYI. Once you join Realtors, once you become a Realtor, NCAR has a legal hotline. Once you're a member, they actually have an attorney that you can call or email and ask questions to. Isn't that a nice member benefit? So many times I hear it say, I don't know what I'm paying for. You're paying for a legal hotline. You're paying for an attorney to help assist with these forms. So when in doubt, find out. Particularly when it comes to our offer to purchase and contract. Let's go back to standard form 2T here. The big picture, the general rule of thumb says that we as brokers do not belong in the sales contract. We are not a party to the contract. Who are the parties to the contract? The sales contract?
The buyer and the seller.
Buyer and seller. I did not hear Julie or broker or agent in that. Did you? So the buyer and the seller are the parties to the contract. So the big picture is, this is not my contract. I do not belong. Specifically, the Real Estate Commission says I cannot have any mention of my commission in the sales contract. Remember, we hash out our commission in the listing agreements, and all of them are in writing before we're even presenting this thing. So we've discussed our commission. We've gotten everybody to agree to our commission before we even present the offer. So don't slip yourself a bonus or try to slip yourself a bonus in the offer to purchase and contract. We don't belong. The other thing the commission specifically says is that I can't make any mention, anything to protect my liability in the contract. So let's say, for example, your buyer waives the home inspection. They say, no, I don't want a home inspection. I'm going to save $500. So I don't need anybody. I can't try to slip something in the contract to protect myself because the buyer doesn't want the home inspection. We actually have another form for that. You'll probably meet it in post licensing, but I have another form I can use that the buyer can waive the home inspection once I've had a conversation with them about the importance of the home inspection. So nothing in there about me. Big picture, I'm not a party to the contract. And like we said, brokers can't draft. Parties to the contract can. Buyer and the seller can draft. They can add, delete. But guys, just because they can doesn't mean that they should. If your buyer or seller starts whipping out their red pen and saying, oh, we're going to see about this, please advise that they talk to an attorney because they don't know the legal ramifications of what this change might do. Does that make sense? So just because they can, if you guys, after we leave here at 1 o'clock and you guys go about your day and do your thing and you hop on the interstate and the speed limit on the interstate says 70 Can you go faster than 70? Could you fly down I-40 at 90 miles per hour? You can. Does that mean that you should? So again, it's about understanding. You think the cop cares? Well, my gas pedal did it. It did it just fine. 90 is not a problem. Understanding the parameters of our job. Can we speed? Yes. But that doesn't mean that we should. Again, that's part of what we're doing in this class. And expanding it further once you get into post-licensing is making sure you understand the parameters of what you can and can't do. Let's see. I think, yeah, let's go ahead and take our break. Let's take 10. We come back, we're gonna switch gears just a bit again. So let's see, it is 10:56. Let's come back at 11:06. And we're gonna switch gears again. How's everybody doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down, up, up, maybe a sideways thumb. What would that look like? You know, you're not sure. No joke. This is a lot of information. I don't know, y'all. If anybody ever told you getting your license was easy, they lied to you. I don't know another way to put that. It's tough. Oh, I got a great. Good, good, good. So as I mentioned earlier, again, if you're just joining us, we're recording. If I have your email in a private chat after class, I will send you an email with a link to the recording, my PowerPoint slides, and then a quiz that we've seen some questions, but it'll be separate. So you'll have like the quiz and then the answer separately. So you can sit down and take it like a true test and then grade yourself. So please make sure I have your email address in a private chat so I can send that to you later today. Also, if you're just joining us, the game plan, we're going to go another hour or so, and then we're going to take a break. And when we come back after our next break, we're going to spend the last time, we're going to talk about some math. So I don't want you guys to be worried about the math. The truth is this is not a math test. This is a real estate test with math in it. So the math alone can't fail you. However, if we can get you to get some of the math though, that's going to up your score and get you passing. So we're going to spend the last 45 minutes or so on math, kind of my game plan. Everybody good? Let's do a thumbs up again. Y'all know how to do a virtual thumbs up? Some of you might be new to Zoom. If you, yep, there it is. If you move your mouse, your little Zoom toolbar pops up and you have reactions. So you can send me a thumbs up. You're welcome to clap. I always accept applause. You can throw confetti at me, you know, all sorts of things that you can do. We can have fun. Zoom fun. All right. Is anybody new to Zoom? Is this anybody's first? No, we're old hats at this. Okay. All right. So let's switch gears again. Have you guys gotten to licensed law and commission rule yet? Have you gotten to agency status and stuff? I understand, like I said, you have. Okay, good. I know you guys got a couple more weekends left, and I didn't know what you covered. So this is going to be a good review for our license status. So let's talk about this. First off, another important word to focus on. Your license is either current. No, that's not what we want to do. Your license is either current or it's not. We'll talk about the not in just a second. When you guys see the word current, I would actually like you to see the word currency. If your license is current, it means you have paid the annual renewal fee. So let's talk about what I'm talking about. The real estate commission operates on a physical year. They do not work on a calendar year. And the commission's physical year is July 1st to June 30th. And all of our licenses expire at 11:59 p.m. on June 30th, unless you renew it. How do you renew it? You renew your license by paying the fee. So you pay the fee to renew your license. By the way, just FYI, the renewal period every year is May 15th to June 30th. So we have these 45 days to submit our renewal fee to the real estate commission. By submitting the renewal fee, that has our license current. Failure to submit the fee, and we're going to talk about active or inactive in just a second. Failure to submit the fee by 11:59 p.m. on June 30th means at the stroke of midnight on July 1st, your license is expired. So the first two statuses, the first two choices we have here, your license is either current or it's expired. Let's all understand, a current license has everything to do with paying the renewal fee. It has nothing to do with education. To have everybody on board so far. How do you keep your license current? You show them the money. You pay the fee. A current license can be either active or inactive. The difference of active or inactive may depend on education. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. The only license status that we can practice, the only license status in which we can advertise our services in any way or get paid is an active license. Can you get paid on an inactive license? No. Can you hand out a business card on an expired license?
No.
No. You want to be able to hand out a card, you want to be able to get paid, we got to have an active license. So we pay the fee for an active license, that's step one. The second piece of that for an active license is, let's see, I think we just said that, inactive, da-da-da. So the second piece of an active license is to do your education. Once you drop your provisional status, we'll talk about PBs in just a second, but once you drop your provisional status and you're just a broker, there's two things you got to do every year to have an active license. Pay the fee and do CE. Kind of rhymes, doesn't it? Pay the fee and do CE. That's how you keep an active license. I'll talk more about CE in just a second. So we renew our license between May 15th and June 30th. Sometime during this renewal, or sometimes during this year, this physical year, we're going to take CE. If you're inactive, it means you've paid the fee, but you're delinquent on education. So an inactive license, either you're a provisional broker without a BIC. Let's talk about this first one for a second. You guys pass Annie's class on the 18th. Okay. And then you go, and then you go on, you know, whenever, before Christmas, first of the year, whatever, you go to PSI testing center and you pass your state exam. Yay, celebrate. Absolutely. That's a big deal. When you pass your state exam, they hand you a license. Congratulations, here's your real estate license. It's on inactive status and you cannot do anything with it. Good job. As a provisional broker, if you want to do something with that license, in order to activate as a provisional broker, you have to affiliate with a broker in charge. You have got to be affiliated with a firm. Remember what I said, my PBs, my PBs are, you know, my brokers with training wheels. With the provisional status being your training wheel, you cannot, as a provisional broker, ride your bike without your broker in charge. Each firm has an active or a license as well. So when the individual renews their license, the firm has to as well during the same renewal period. And as a broker, as I said, we have to do CE every year. There's 8 hours of continuing education, 2 4-hour classes. So let's think about what I'm telling you. If you want an active license year after year after year, you pay the fee and you do your 8 hours of CE. That's all you have to do to have an active license. If you pay the fee, but don't do CE, your license is inactive. Everybody with me? The deadline for CE every single year is June 10th. June 10th, June 10th, June 10th. That date needs to be up there with importance with like your birthday anniversary, Christmas, right? Very important date. Failure to take CE by June 10th, assuming you've paid the fee, means on July 1st, your license will go inactive. As a provisional broker, once you guys get licensed, how long do you have to take post-licensing?
18 months.
18 months. So from the day you get your license, you have 18 months to complete your 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. Failure to do that means your license will be inactive until you complete post. To reinstate an inactive license, you've paid the fee, but now you're delinquent on education. That's what we're saying. You've paid the fee, so you're current, but you're inactive, presumably because you haven't done your education. And in order to reinstate an inactive license, the commission will require you to get caught up on education. I don't want you guys to get so bogged down in every single word on the slide. The big picture of this slide says, if you're delinquent in your education, in order to reinstate, in order to reactivate, you got to get caught up on education. If you're within 2 years of a CE deficiency, they're going to get caught up on C. If you're more than 2 years with a CE deficiency, they're going to make you get caught up on CE, and they're going to make you do some post-licensing. Again, the big picture here says you got to get caught up on education. Guys, you could ride for the rest of your life on an inactive license. All you have to do is submit that fee every year. And why you might consider doing that, I'll explain in just a second. I just finished up a post-licensing class last night, and I had a lady in my class whose license number was older than mine. I got my license in 2008. And I said, how is your license number older than mine? My girl got her license in 2006, never activated. She paid the fee. What is that, 12 years ago? She paid the fee every year. She woke up one day and said, well, gee, now I want to do something with this real estate license I got 12 years ago. So now she's coming back and taking her post licensing. She maintained an active license for all that time. Why does she do that? I'll explain it in just a second. So again, you're inactive because you're delinquent in education, or you're a PB without a BIC. Failure to pay the fee, nothing to do with education. Failure to pay the fee means on July 1st, your license is expired. Can you practice on an expired license? Nope. How you reinstate an expired license depends on how long it's been expired. If it's expired for 0 to 6 months, all you got to do is pay the renewal fee, you pay a reinstatement fee, you submit your activation form to the commission, and poof, you're active again. Assuming you're caught up on your education. If your license, if you want to reinstate a license, is expired, it's been expired for 6 months to 2 years, again, you pay the fees, submit your activation form, and then you either got to go take a post-licensing, or you get to go back to PSI Testing Center and sit through the state exam again. What do you think most people choose to do? Let me sit through a 30-hour post-licensing class, please. But it's up to you. So if your license, if you want to reactivate a license that's been expired for 6 months to 2 years, do y'all know what happens if you want to reinstate a license that's been expired for more than 2 years? Anybody know?
You got to redo everything, right?
Oh, the horror. If your license is expired for more than 2 years, you got to start all over. So why did my girl pay the fee for 12 years and ride an inactive license? because she said, I've been through pre-licensing once. I made it. I don't want to go through it again. Is it worth sending the $45 in every year? I can't answer that for you. I think what happens is that, you know, sometimes we come to forks in the road in life, and maybe you choose the road that directs you away from real estate. You think you're done. You think you're going to put it aside. Maybe you want to take time to start a family. Maybe you get another job. Maybe you need to care for an elderly parent. Anything can happen, right? But you need to make the decision. If you're putting real estate off to the side for a second, you need to make the decision if you want to keep sending in that $45 renewal fee each year to keep your license inactive. So if you do wake up one day again and you decide you want to reactivate, you don't have to come back and see Annie and I again. I mean, we'd love to see you guys again, but not in pre. Let's see you in CE, or better yet, let's all do a transaction together one time. How does that sound? Doesn't that sound like fun? Let's do a deal together. So an expired license, anything more than 2 years, is that always hurts me a little bit when I see this slide. I know, yeah, I had to go through pre-licensing too. I get it. Pay the fee. Questions? License status, current, expired. Current license can be active or inactive. Let's see. So here's our CE. As we said, we do 8 hours a year. It's broken up into 2 4-hour classes. We have to do a 4-hour update. The update is the commission's opportunity to present all licensees across the state the same information, the same material. If you are a provisional broker or a full broker, you're going to do the general update, also known as the Gen Up. If you're a BIC eligible or a designated broker in charge, you will do the broker in charge update, also known as the BIC Up. In addition to the update, you take a 4-hour elective, and the elective is a topic of your choosing. Use this opportunity for CE for elective. If you have a niche, if you have a certain area you're interested in, if you have a certain thing that you want to learn more about, I'm going to venture out and say this. I may get proven wrong, but I feel comfortable saying this. Name a topic. I'm almost certain you can find an approved elective for it. So pretty much anything. I mean, there's a cajillion approved elective topics out there. Somebody asked me how many times did it take me to pass the class? Just once. Ask me how many times it took me to get through the state exam. I got to go to PSI testing center twice. It's tough. It's tough. I have no shame in telling y'all I had to go back twice. I promise you guys, no buyer or seller is ever going to look at you and say, how many times did it take you? All they want to know is, do you have a license? Do you guys want some good news? I got some good news for you guys. As my soon-to-be provisional brokers, you guys don't have to take CE until your second renewal period. So remember when we said the renewal period was May 15th to June 30th. So what I would like you guys to do, the day you pass your state exam and you get your license, stop and ask yourself, draw yourself a timeline if you need to, but stop and ask yourself, if I get my license today, when's the first time I hit May 15th? And the first time you hit May 15th, you don't have to do CE, but you do have to pay the fee. Always pay the fee. When in doubt, pay the fee. So the first renewal period, is that good news? Is that, there's something there, at least that, right? So you don't have to do CE until your second renewal period. And then you got to do CE every year and pay the fee that you want an active license.
Question, Julie, do we get a reminder of the fee? Do they send you emails, stuff like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. They're going to be a little annoying about it. You're going to get emails. You might get a postcard in the mail. Your book will tell you 20 times. There's a dang countdown calendar on the commission's homepage. So if you're not aware that it's time to pay the fee, it's because you got your head in the sand and you're not paying attention to anything going on around you. I always pay, because, you know, I'm one of those, just let me get it over with. And so I usually pay mine about the 15th or 16th, something like that. And about the 17th, I'm like, I got it. It's paid. It's cool. But yeah, they're letting you know. To your point, William, guys, they may not, I don't think they remind you when your 18 months is running out. So whenever you get your license, I'll show you as a matter of fact. Hang this thing with pride. So you get your license. It looks a little something like this. Y'all go get you a nice frame because you worked hard for this thing. So display it. But once you get your license, there's going to be a date on here that starts your 18-month clock. So they're not going to remind you. They're not going to call you and say, you know, William, it's been 17 months. Don't forget to do your post licensing. That's up to you guys to make sure you keep up with that time. I recently learned there's a website for everything, isn't there? If you guys go to calculator.net, you can do a date calculator, and you can put in the day you got your license in 18 months, and it'll tell you exactly to the day. Isn't that kind of cool? Calculator.net, do a date calculator. So once you get past your first renewal period, pay the fee. Once you get past your first renewal period, now you got to do CE every year, pay the fee and do CE every year that you want an active license. When did we say the CE deadline was?
June 30th.
June 10th.
10th. Oh, 10th, yeah.
June 10th, every single year. Y'all, please don't let this get away from you. Don't wait until June 9th or June 10th to do CE. Most schools start CE again in like August. So we have plenty of time from like August to June 10th. The Real Estate Commission has a blackout period from June 11th to June 30th, which means no school, no education provider in the state of North Carolina can offer CE between June 11th and June 30th. So failure to do your CE by June 10th, complete both 4-hour classes by June 10th, means assuming you've paid the fee, on July 1st, your license will be inactive, and it will remain inactive until you can get caught up on CE. Unfortunately, I do not care if you're in the throes of a transaction or not. Failure to do CE by June 10th, assuming you've paid the fee, means on July 1st, your license is inactive. When it comes to the CE deadline, the Real Estate Commission may grant an extension for a hardship, but let's understand a hardship is not, I got busy and I forgot. A hardship is something like active military deployment, for example. Contact the commission if you think you qualify for an extension, but do not call them and say, well, I've been busy and I just didn't have a chance. The commission is going to say you have from like August to June to do it. Don't let it get away from you. The other piece of education from the commission that we've dabbled around is your post licensing. So once you guys get your license, you have 90 more hours of education to look forward to. We break those down into 3 30-hour post-licensing classes. All 3 have to be complete within 18 months. Otherwise, your license goes inactive until it is complete. There
Julie,
are 3 posts. Yeah.
For the 8 hours continuing education, is that done like via your firm, or do we have to take another course?
Some firms may bring in CE in-house, but usually it's offered by like Carolina School of Real Estate or some other education provider.
Okay.
So, but I have heard of firms like bringing in a CE instructor, so it might just come down to the firm. But as long as the instructor and the elective, or the class, I should say, is approved, then you can get credit for it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Julie, I have a question. These 3 30-hour post-licensing classes, do you think it's smart to go ahead and knock that education out before you actually go to a firm?
So, Angela, that's a great question. And unfortunately, I can't answer that for you. So here's the deal. Some of you are rip-roaring ready to go. As soon as you leave PSI Testing Center, you've talked to a firm and you're ready to run over there and sign something, right? Others of you may want to knock out the education and then get started on your career. So which one do I think? I mean, it kind of comes down to you. Generally speaking, from my experience, most of my post-licensing classes, I could almost have a split, a half and half. Half are active with a firm, half are inactive. So, I'm going to say it depends. And I know that's probably not the answer you were looking for, and I apologize for that. But I'm going to say it depends the individual. Just know that you have choices and do what's best for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Julie, what route? I know you've been doing this for a long time now, but what route did you take when you passed the boards, if you will?
So I'm kind of unique because, I told you guys I got my license in, what I say, 08?
08, yes.
I've actually been in real estate for 22 years. I started as an administrator. So I was kind of the behind the scenes person before I delved into the sales thing. So the whole reason when I got my license, I'm not going to lie, y'all, when I got my license, I never had any intention of using them, but I got my license because I was starting to do in-house training with my agents. And I kind of felt like my license would help me better understand them. So I rode for the first 5-6 years on an inactive license and did my CE and everything, and I literally woke up one day and thought, well, gee, why are they out there having all the fun? I want to do this sales things too. So I didn't start practicing for quite a while after I got my license. I'm a very unique case. Again, I never thought I was going to use it. I believe I actually looked at my parents and said, I'm never going to do sales. So imagine that phone call when I was like, okay, I'm going to do sales now. So, just goes to show you that sometimes things change, Parents like to hold you to it when you say stuff like that, right? You said never. Never say never.
Thanks.
Again, you guys, you just need to, you need to make that. Has anybody talked to a firm? Has anybody talked to a BIC? Do they have some place to go once they get their license? Maybe a couple of you just starting. Okay, so you guys may want to activate so you can get started and then take your post. Just don't let this time get away from you. Fair enough? Each post-licensing class does have a test that you have to pass. But I'm here to tell you, post-licensing isn't near as intense as pre. Pre is the hard thing. Now, you still need to commit to post. You still need to do the assignments and follow along and get the information. I'm not saying it's a guarantee that you're going to pass, but post isn't near as intense. Once we get you over these hurdles to get your license, that is clearly, definitely the hard part. But promise me you'll still commit during post so you can get through that as well. CE is different than pre-licensing and post-licensing. Pre and post-licensing are for you guys, our newbies. CE is for everybody. Guys, there are two different departments down at the commission. So you're not going to get CE credit for doing post-licensing. You can't get post-licensing credit for doing CE. They're two separate things. We need to keep those separated. By the way, your post-licensing topics, the three classes, 301, 302, 303, you can take them in any order that you want. You don't have to go in a specific order. One of your post-licensing classes is brokerage relationships and responsibilities, which is just a fancy way of saying agency, which I just mentioned something about units 7 and 8. Another post-licensing class is contracts and closings, which is basically units 9 and 10. See what we're doing here? And then your third post-licensing class is pretty much license law and commission rule. It's North Carolina law, rule, and regulations, I think it's called. So what I'm telling you guys is the three heavily tested topics, agency, contracts, and license law and commission rule and pre-licensing. This is what you have to look forward to in post. We're just scratching surfaces in pre. We'll dig a little deeper when you come to post.
I have one more question, Julie. It's kind of off topic.
Oh, good.
But okay, let me see. I have heard some people say that if you, of course, you're going to study all the material, but if you study 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15, and North Carolina laws, that you'll pass the test. Is that true?
I don't know if that's true or not. I think we need to focus on all the material. Has Annie introduced you guys to the Relink book yet? Real estate licensing in North Carolina, and it kind of goes through the process of getting your license, filling out your application, Once you guys meet that Relink book, it gives you a breakdown of how many questions you can expect to see on your state exam from each topic. So Keisha, to your point, you're going to see there's a lot of questions from agency. There's a lot of questions from contract, financing, license law and commission rule. Can you pass just by that alone? I don't know that math will work out. If you guys know me, you know I'm kind of a math nerd, a self-proclaimed math nerd. And I sat down once with our end of class exam and actually figured out that like 40% of your exam comes from units 7, 8, 9, and 10. So studying that will help you, but it's not enough. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So make sure you're looking at the whole thing, but yes, use that Relink, real estate licensing in North Carolina. If you haven't met it yet, I'm sure you will. But that kind of gives you the breakdown so you can know how many questions to expect to see from each topic.
Thank you.
Yep. It's a lot of information.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is your take on, your opinion, I guess, on, us as newbies maybe going at it part-time?
Unfortunately, that's not up to me. So you need to discuss with your firm. Some firm will bring on part-time. Right. Some want you to be full-time. I totally understand that some of you may not be willing or able to give up your job yet, the one that makes money. So you may need to start part-time and do that transition. Again, it's come down to the individual. I mean, could you get started faster if you were full-time? Well, of course you could, but not all of us may be able to do that. So it's going to come down to what you need, your needs. Just know if you're part-time, you might be limiting the pool of people that you can work with. So for example, if you work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, you're not available to go out during that time and show property, are you? So if a buyer's only available to see property in the morning, then you're not going to be able to assist that buyer. And that's why I mean kind of limiting your pool a little bit.
I mean, at least at that point, you could get your referral fee if you pass it on to someone
As long as your
else.
license is active, a referral fee is better than nothing, right? So absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, of course. I know you guys haven't gotten to Unit 19 yet, but these are the protected classes. I tend to remember mine by Fred's Corn. The other alternative, and I don't know how Annie does it, you'll find out tomorrow, but the other alternative could be Fresh Corn. The difference is if you use disability or handicap. So if you use handicap, you're going to do Fresh Corn. I'm going to let Annie talk to you guys about the protected classes when you get to Unit 19. But this just kind of helps us remember fair housing, protected classes. And here's the good news, you guys. There's a state level of fair housing as well. So we have federal fair housing and we have North Carolina fair housing. That's not the good news. The good news is that North Carolina fair housing protected classes are the same as federal fair housing. Some states have differences, but North Carolina parallels with fair housing. So familial status is a protected class. Familial status is about the children. I cannot discriminate against, for example, a buyer or tenant, particularly a tenant because they have kids or are with child. A person's race, the group of people that they affiliate with or have affiliated with their whole lives is a protected class. The E in fresh is not a protected class. It's just a filler so I could spell the word. Disability handicap status is a protected class. Sex is a protected class. As of February, I think it was February 2021, under the category of sex now also includes gender identity and sexual orientation. So under the category of sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation are now protected classes. Color is referring to the individual skin, the color of your skin. Again, opportunity is not a protected class. I just needed something to fill in the blank to spell the word. Religion, spiritual belief is a protected class. And then your national origin, where you or your direct ancestors hail from. Again, you guys will get there with Annie. Couple big picture things. I think the big picture of fair housing says anybody, regardless of their protected class, everybody should have the right to live wherever they want, as long as it's within their financial means. Back to what we said earlier when we were talking about agency and disclosure. We can talk about the property all day long. We cannot talk about the people. They're protected. That's what we mean by a protected class. And I think the other big picture of fair housing, and I think this is just a good standard business practice, what you do for one, you do for all. Treat everybody the same. And that way nobody can ever come back to you and claim or try to claim that you treated them differently, thus you discriminated against them. So Annie will spend time with you guys this weekend or whenever she gets to it. Unit 19 is your fair housing. Unit 19 is not only important for your exams, but it's important for your career. Make sure that we're not in any violation. So let's talk about some general brokerage provisions. Again, I don't know if you've gotten it here or not. If you're hearing it here for the first time, Annie's still going to get to it. So there's a general brokerage provision about changing your name or your address. Let's say you get married and change your name. What if you get divorced and change your name? Anytime we have a name or address change, we're responsible for notifying the real estate commission of that change. Does anybody know within how many days? Haven't gotten to it yet? Well, I'll tell you. Within 10 days of that change. So once again, if you change your name or your address, Once you guys get licensed, you'll have a licensee log on. So you can go to the commission's website, click on your licensee log on, and then you can update your information. There's a general brokerage provision. You guys know you have to have a background check done in order to get your license, right? Has Annie covered that? Okay, so you got to do a background check. Once you get your license, you're not home free. Once you get your license, if you get yourself in trouble, if you get convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor, you have a duty to report that conviction to the commission within 60 days. I need you guys to note something. This says conviction. Does that say charged with a felony or a misdemeanor? So you don't have to report it until the gavel comes down and the judge says guilty. So here's the deal, you guys. You do something wrong, you get you a felony or a misdemeanor. I don't know if you'll have a disciplinary action against your license or not. I don't know. The commission handles these on a case-by-case basis. So they'll evaluate and determine if they need to discipline your license based on your conviction. This is what I do know. Failure to report the conviction is a violation of commission rule. So failure to report it within 60 days, you will get yourself a disciplinary action. Let's go back to mama again. Anybody else? This is the house I grew up in. My mom always told me that if I do something wrong, I'm better off telling her than letting her find out on her own. Anybody else's mama?
Yeah.
She says, fess up. Don't let me find out. Don't let me go to church on Sunday and find out. You better fess up and tell me. Let's think of the real estate commission as mama in this case. I don't know if you'll get in trouble for what you did. I do know you will get in trouble if you don't report it. Fair enough? Don't let them find out on their own. We got a general brokerage provision that says talks about delivery of instruments. First off, let's talk about what the heck an instrument is. An instrument is pretty much just any document related to this transaction. So it's going to start with the agency agreements, agency agreement, disclosure, etc. Eventually, hopefully, we'll move forward to the contract paperwork. And then, fingers crossed, we make it to the very end and we have closing documents. There's a commission rule that says that we have a duty to deliver instruments. Does anybody know within how many days from execution do we have to deliver these instruments to our clients?
Is it 3? I don't know.
I'll say that with confidence. 3. Come on. Yes, it's 3.
3 days.
You did not seem sure. Let's try that again. How many days? 3.
3.
So what this says, you guys, once we have a signed agency agreement, I have 3 days to deliver that agency agreement to my client. Once I have a signed contract, I have 3 days to deliver that to my client. Everybody with me? There's a common misconception. Some agents think that they can wait till the very end of the transaction and send everything in a nice, neat package. Can we do that? No. Guys, it should not. It's as simple as sending an email with a PDF attachment. Okay? Attaches our signed agency agreement. I look forward to working with you. Have a nice day. Please note that says deliver. That's my job. Am I going to document that I delivered it? I see some head shaking. Yes. Why? Because what do we document?
Everything.
Everything. What they do with it when they get it, not on me. Are they going to delete it? Are they going to shred it? Are they going to print it and put it in the file cabinet forever and ever? Not on me. My job is to deliver it to them. Everybody see that? And I have 3 days from execution to deliver those documents. There's also a commission rule that addresses retention of records. What's the minimum I have to keep my documentation? Anybody know that minimum?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Trying to make it easy for us, don't they? There's another 3 years. The rule says I got to keep everything. What are we documenting?
Everything.
Everything. So we're going to keep everything for a minimum of 3 years. This 3-year clock starts at the successful or the unsuccessful conclusion of the transaction. Whenever our very last act happens is when our 3-year clock starts. We got a general broker's provision on advertising, as we discussed earlier. You cannot advertise, you cannot do a single thing for an owner without first getting a written agency agreement. There is no such thing as oral seller agreement. There is no such thing as oral property management agreement. If I'm advertising anything for sale or for rent, it's because I have a written agency agreement. I have the owner's consent to do it. All the rules about advertising, by the by, do include social media. So just because you have a Facebook or an Instagram or whatever you're on, how old did I just sound? I don't even know. TikTok, is that the current one? I don't know, whatever. But just because you have some form of social media, let's say, doesn't give you the right to not follow the advertising guidelines of the Real Estate Commission. And one thing in particular that they give us is that our advertisements for sale or for rent, our properties, cannot have a blind ad. A blind ad is one that does not include the firm's name. Whose listing is it? Is it the individual broker's listing?
No.
No. Whose listing is it, Keisha, since you unmuted?
The firm.
The firm's listing. So advertising guidelines said all of our advertising has to include the firm's name because it's their listing. Failure to include the firm's name is a blind ad. Let's see, that's a good one. Just real quick, in North Carolina, we're all brokers. We all have a broker's license. It's just the different categories. Provisional brokers are soon to be you guys, my brokers with training wheels. Once you drop that provisional status, you're just a broker. And then at some point in your career, you may choose to become the broker in charge. There's certain criteria. I'll let Annie discuss that about how you become BIC eligible. Once you're BIC eligible, you are eligible to become the designated broker in charge. Every office location has to have a designated broker in charge. We need a designated BIC under each roof. Remember earlier we talked about some of these firms that have 5 office locations. If you're a firm with 5 locations, how many designated BICs do you need? You need 5. You need a designated BIC under each roof. There's some requirements for who needs a license. Not everybody needs a license. Specifically, the people that need a license is anybody that's engaged in the transfer of real property. I'll break that down in just a second. For compensation for others. All three of these are required to have a license. So let's say, for example, somebody is a for sale by owner. As a for sale by owner, you're not doing it for others, are you? As a for sale by owner, who are you doing it for?
Yourself.
You're doing it for you. So does the FSBO need a license?
No.
No, because they're not doing it for others. What if you decide, which I don't know, y'all call me before you decide to do this, but what if you decide to work absolutely for free? You're not going to accept compensation. You're not going to accept anything of value. Anything in value may be money, but it also may be something like dinner or a free rent, for example. If you're going to work 100% for free, don't do it. But if you are, do you need a license? No. All three, everybody with me? All three of these activities are required. This is the formula, if you will, for a license. So this transfer of real property, we can get specific and we can break this down. We talk about LL beings. If you're engaging, if you're going to list, lease, buy, exchange, auction, negotiate, or sell real property for compensation for others, a license is required. All three. So if you see this on your test, you need to make sure, again, it's a formula. This plus this plus this equal a license, requirement for a license. So you need to make sure you have all three pieces. Sometimes firms, sometimes the individual broker. Let's imagine this scenario. You're a couple years into your career, you're so busy, you need help. Isn't that a bad problem? Isn't that a good problem to have? So sometimes firms, sometimes the individual brokers may employ an unlicensed employee. And there are certain things that the unlicensed employee can and can't do. License law and commission rule spells out. These are things that are allowed. They can do data entry into MLS. They can fill in the blanks of the offer to purchase and contract, as long as the information that they're filling in was provided to them by their employing broker. It's data entry only. They're transferring the information from the subway napkin to the form or to the MLS. Everybody with me? The unlicensed employee, they can put signs in the yards, lock boxes on the property. They can provide basic information. They can order repairs. They can communicate with everybody. They cannot negotiate. We need a license to do that. The unlicensed employee, let's make sure we all see this. The unlicensed employee can show properties for rent. The unlicensed employee cannot show properties for sale. So they can show rental properties only. The unlicensed employee is allowed to manage the trust account. There's a lot of things that they can do. One of the biggest distinctions between the unlicensed employee and the real estate agent is how we're paid. The unlicensed employee can only be paid hourly or salary. They cannot be paid a commission. They cannot be paid per transaction. So if you hire somebody to work for you for 10 hours a week, you're paying that person for 10 hours a week, regardless if you have a closing this week or not. They cannot be a per transaction. It is hourly or salary only. Dream of the day that you got to hire somebody to help you out for 10 hours a week. You'll get there. It's not uncommon when you affiliate with your firms It's not uncommon to see unlicensed employees work there. I mean, what did I just tell you guys? I was an unlicensed employee for 12 years before I ever got my license. Any questions? Comments, concerns? Thoughts on life? No? Good, because I don't have the answers to thoughts on. I don't know the answer to. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's take our last break. It's 12:02. So let's come back at 12:12. And when we do, we're just going to kind of skip ahead and spend the rest of our time talking about some math. So 10 minutes. Do we come back for the math? Is there anybody out there that when I say math, you just heard a 4-letter word that I shouldn't have said out loud in public? Am I cussing at you? Come on, you guys.
Run.
So, you know, so you don't have to know me for too long to know that I'm kind of a math nerd. I honestly wish there was more math on this test than what there is. I know you'd be throwing rotten tomatoes at me right now if we were in person. I said that. That's why I'm in the safety of Zoom and you can't touch me. Baha. So the math is what it is. There's math on your test. Please, please understand, guys, you're not going to take a math test next weekend. You're taking a real estate test with some math in it. So let's first off go ahead and say you can miss all the math and still pass this test. You can go to PSI Testing Center and miss all the math. It's still possible to pass. However, if we can get you to get some of this math, that may help your score, right? So if you're not so proficient in one topic, you may be able to use a math problem here or there. So for those of you that I'm getting thumbs downs and all sorts of emoji reactions. So for those of you that are here, I appreciate you being here for the last 45 minutes, understanding that very few of us are fans of math. Another thing I like to say about the math. One thing I like a whole lot about it is a lot of times with the math, there's several different ways you can work the problem. And quite frankly, I don't care how you get to the right answer, just get to the right answer. If you guess right, you've gotten that one right. You got a 25% chance going into it of getting this one right. Everybody with me? There's some math for you. 25% chance of getting this one right. So there's our brains may see it different, and there's several different ways. Does anybody ever remember, did anybody in high school ever get dock points for not showing your work or not doing math the exact same way the math teacher told you to do? Did that drive y'all nuts? Do we think that was fair? I mean, we're here now, and I don't care how you get the right answer. Just get the right answer. You don't have to show us your work. All you have to do is show us A, B, C, or D. So if your strategy is to guess on all the math, I guess the only thing I would say to you is be consistent. Pick your favorite, A, B, C, or D, and be consistent. That's going to kind of help up your chances. Okay, so what's your favorite? Is it B? Then use B. So I'd like to introduce, and I don't know how Annie teaches the math, but I'd like to introduce you guys to my favorite math tool. And my favorite math tool is something called the T-bar. So let me give you guys, either please take a picture of this or jot it down super fast. Let me give you just a few minutes, something that we can refer back to it. And once we take a few minutes and explain what all this means, then we'll look at some examples together, but just take a few minutes and then we'll talk about it. You guys got enough jotted down that we can start discussing? I'm not going anywhere. I'll be on the slide for a bit. So let's talk about what we're looking at. If we're able to use the T-bar, I have three different variables. I have something called the part, something called the whole, something called the rate or percent. Whenever you're reading a math problem, for the most part, not all the time, sometimes there are formulas you just have to know, like net operating income. You guys got into that yet? I can't use the T-bar for net operating income. You just got to memorize the formula. But for the most part, when you read a word problem that says rate or percent, again, for the most part, we can use a T-bar. So let's talk first about placement. The rate or percent always, you hear my absolute word? The rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. So whenever you see a word problem, it gives you a rate or percent, don't think about it. Julie said the rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. That leaves me with two other variables. I have something called the part and something called the whole. We'll talk more about that in just a second. The lines in the T-bar also mean something. The back forth line, east-west line, horizontal line, whatever you want to call it. This means divide. The up-down line means multiply. So if I'm using the T-bar, I have two known variables and one unknown. And that unknown variable is my x. My x is what I'm solving for. So essentially what I'm telling you is the T-bar actually gives me three formulas. If my x is the percent or the rate, then I'm going to take the part and divide it by the whole. If my x is the whole, I'm going to take the part and divide it by the percent or rate. If my x is the part, then I'm going to take the whole times the percent. So I know two, and I'm solving for one of these variables. Everybody with me so far? Rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. You guys shouldn't have to stop and think about that. Rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. So let's talk about what the part and whole mean. Generally speaking, the part is going to be the smaller number. When I'm looking at the part and the whole, two variables, generally speaking, the part is going to be the smaller number. So we can know, for the most part, that the part is the number on top. The smaller number is on top. The bigger number is in the bottom left. So let's talk through a quick example together. Let's see you're reading a math problem. We're just going to kind of make something up off the fly here. Let's say you're reading a math problem and it tells you that your commission is 2%. Your sales price is $100,000. And the problem asks you to solve how much commission are you going to get on a $100,000 sales price when you make 2%. So we read the problem, we see rate or percent, and that means that we can automatically throw down a T-bar. And the very first thing I can do is fill in the rate or percent. Because Julie said it always goes where? It always goes in the bottom right. So now the next piece is to figure out which is the sales price and which is the commission. What is the part? What is the whole? Unfortunately, of the two, which one's going to be the smaller number? Commission or sales price?
The commission.
The commission. So what that tells me is that the commission is the number that I'm solving for, with my sales price going as the whole, going in the bottom left. Now that I've completed my T-bar, the T-bar says to solve for X, I take 100,000 times 2%, gives me a commission. How much am I going to get paid?
$2,000.
So I took the information in the formula and in the problem, and I plugged it into the T-bar. So what if? I hear you. What if, Julie? I hear you. I have been doing math tutoring, oh my gosh, 12 years, 13 years, something like that. And hands down, the number one question I get with math tutoring is, when do I divide and when do I multiply? And my highly educated response to you if you don't know, is to do it both ways. And this is one way that the T-bar can help. So let's say you're in the throes of the test and you cannot for the life of you remember if commission should go on top or commission should go on the bottom right. We know where the 2% goes, right? Don't even think about it. Rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. So now we're in the test and you go, oh my gosh, is sales price go on the top or sales price go on the bottom? My response to you is to do it both ways and see what you get. So now that I've swapped these numbers around, now if I take 100,000 and divide it by 2%, 2%. Does anybody have your calculator with you? Does anybody want to tell me what your commission would be if you took 100,000 and divide it by 2%?
$5 million.
$5 million. Heck yeah.
I love that.
Does that, right? Guys, we would all get in real estate long enough to sell one house and then we would retire, right? If you could sell a $100,000 house and get $5 million in commission, I guarantee you this Cram course would be a lot fuller right now. Your pre-licensing class would be a lot fuller. My point to you, if you don't know whether to divide or multiply, do it both ways and see which one makes more sense. Always understanding that the rate or percent goes in the bottom right. I would much rather you guys use your test time doing something, picking the calculator up and doing something, than staring at a blank piece of paper, waiting on numbers to magically appear in front of you. Because you know what the numbers are not going to do? Magically appear in front of you. So pick the calculator up and do something. Do I multiply? Do I divide? Ooh, do it both ways and see what you get. Always keeping that 2%, or excuse me, that percent or rate in the bottom right. So let's look at a specific problem now. In Unit 8, you guys talked about your commission math, but you also talked about something called seller net. So let's look at the formula first for seller net using the T-bar. And I'm going to make a quick edit here while you're jotting this down. So jot this down real quick, and then we're going to talk about it. So when we're working seller net problems, generally speaking, the problem is going to ask you for the sales price. It's going to tell you your seller wants to net X amount. These are their expenses. This is what they have to pay. How much, or what do we have to, what's the minimum sales price? There we go. What's the minimum sales price we have to get in order for the seller to net X amount? Seller net is what the seller is going to walk away with once all of their expenses and debts are paid, right? Once they pay off their mortgages and their liens and their delinquent taxes, excise tax, deed preparation, all of their expenses and debits except commission. Now, don't worry, I will get you paid in just a second. Commission does not belong on the top. So the number on top is what the seller wants to walk away with this when this transaction is said and done, plus all their expenses and debts except commission. The bottom left is the sales price, which generally speaking is the number we're going to solve for. And then let's talk about the seller ratio or seller rate, either one, rate or ratio. And when we talk about seller rate or ratio, I like to think about pi. Is it mean to talk about pi at 12:30? Have you guys had lunch yet? If not, I apologize, but I know I haven't. So I'm like, ooh, pi. So when we talk about pi, let's pretend that the pi represents the entire sales price. The sales price is the seller's, yes? The seller's going to get the sales price minus expenses, minus debts, minus everything, and then they get what's left in the pie. If the seller gets the entire sales price, the whole pie, the seller is going to take a very small piece of pie to pay us. So our commission is figured in the seller ratio by thinking of pie. And we can always figure the seller ratio. We start with 100%, we start with the whole pie, and then we deduct whatever commission the seller promised to pay us. The seller is giving us a piece of their pie. So if the seller is going to give you a 2% piece of their pie, what's left for the seller? What are they going to keep for themselves to pay their expenses and their debts?
98%.
Look at y'all. I said you couldn't do math. 98%. So the seller ratio is going to be 100% minus whatever agreed upon commission. Again, they have the whole pot. It's their pot. They're giving us a small piece of the pie. They have what's ever left. They pay off all their expenses and debts, and then the seller net is whatever's left. Questions so far? Okay. Well, it's only so much fun to talk about it. The real fun comes in when we do it. So here is an actual problem for you guys. Take what you know, and you're welcome to tell me in a private chat what you think the answer is. I'll give you just a few minutes, and then we'll talk about it.
Shit.
Give you like 30 more seconds or so, and then we'll talk about it. You guys ready? So when we first see a math problem, just like any problem, first thing we're going to do is just read it. Just read the problem. So this one says, Murphy calls you to list his home. At the listing appointment, he tells you he has to walk away with no less than $65,000. He agrees to offer $2,500 in closing costs. He has to pay off his existing mortgage of $135,000. Murphy agrees to pay 5% commission, which you're going to split with the selling agent. What is the minimum Murphy's home can sell in order for him to net $65,000? We've read the problem. I saw rate or percent. So I know that that means that I can throw down and use a T-bar. A lot of times when I do math, I like to start with where I want to end. What do I mean by that? The very first thing I like to do is identify my X. What is it that I'm solving for? We talked earlier about problems being tricky, and other things that problems like to do is give you distractors. What's a distractor's job? Its whole purpose?
Right.
To distract you. So if you allow yourself to break away from the X, then it's easy to get distracted. So identify your X first so you know where you want to go, you know where you want to end, and that'll help keep your focus. So what we're looking for is the minimum price, and what we call it in the problem was the sales price. That's my X, and that's all I care about. If the information doesn't get me to my X, it's a distractor, and I can put it off to the side. So now let's fill in the rest of it. If everything Murphy's going to get represents 100%, and of Murphy's pie, he's going to give you 5%, what's Murphy get to keep for himself?
95%.
That's right. So 100% minus whatever Murphy agrees to pay you, the rest is through the eyes of the seller. Guys, please remember, our commission is based off of the sales price. Do I know my sales price yet?
No.
Thus, I don't know my commission yet, do I? You guys with me? So I can't try to put the commission anywhere else except for have Murphy share it with me in his pie. So 100% minus whatever commission is what the seller's rate is. Put your seller hat on when you're doing these problems. Questions so far on how we got the 95, Murphy's pie? So now we need to figure the number on top. The number on top is whatever Murphy wants to net, plus all of his expenses and all of his debts, everything but commission. We just figured that here in the 95% with Murphy's pie. So now we go back through the problem. Murphy wants to net $65,000. Murphy looks at you and says, I can't sell my house if at the end of this transaction, you don't put a check for at least $65,000 in my hand. Is that a material fact to you as a listing agent?
Yes.
I don't care.
Yes,
I don't care as long as I make X amount. I don't care as long as I make, you know, remember my seller, the man was going to drive me nuts. So Murphy says $65,000 is important to him to have in his pocket. In addition to what he wants to net, he's also agreed to pay some closing costs, and he must pay off his existing mortgage so he can convey title. So we're going to add all that up, and let me make sure I just did my math right. 65,000 plus 2,500 plus 135. So the number on top is Murphy's net plus all of his expenses and debts, everything except commission. I've completed my T-bar. I filled it in as I worked my way through the problem. So now the only other thing I have left to do to solve for X is divide. So I take the number on top, divide it by 95%, and we get a minimum sales price.
2013, 158.
And you can round, yeah, absolutely. So my minimum sales price. So let's talk about what this number means. In order for Murphy to sell his home, pay off his existing mortgage, pay the agreed upon closing costs, and pay me, I've got to sell his house for at least $213,158. If I sell his home for 1 penny less, Murphy's going to make less than $65,000. Do I have a happy seller if I'm giving him less than $65,000? No. What if I sell his home for more than $213,158? Now I'm putting a check for more than $65,000. You guys with me? He has an agency agreement to pay me 5%. He has to pay off his mortgage, and he's already agreed to pay that $2,500. So the difference here, the balance, is going to be what gives to or from Murphy. Before I agree to take this listing, I still have some more research to do, right? I now know the minimum sales price. Don't I need to pull some comps, look at some CMAs to make sure that I can sell Murphy's house for this amount? Make sure the neighborhood will support it, make sure comps close by. Have you guys made it to unit 17 yet? Your appraisal unit? No, not yet. Okay, so good. So you learn more about that this weekend as well. But I need to do a little bit of research to make sure that it's feasible for me to sell Murphy's house for this amount before I agree to list it. Does that make sense? So when we pull comps, and you guys will get here this weekend, but let's say we pull some comps and I find out, let me make some numbers up. I find out the average in the neighborhood is 165,000 to 163,000. Is it likely I'm going to sell Murphy's house for $213,000 when the average is so much lower? This is what we mean. Just because you come up with a seller or sales price doesn't mean it's a guarantee. I still need to do some comps and make sure that that works. So you guys have that to look forward to this weekend.
Then in that case, what would, oh, sorry. In that case, how would you tell your seller, like, hey, like these numbers don't add up, or like, how would you assess the problem?
Pretty much. So I have a piece of paper in my hand and I say, here's my comps, here's my research, this is what I found. This neighborhood, this area just isn't going to support that purchase price. So, and you know, guys, before we ask anybody to sign the agency agreement, the listing agreement, obviously we have to have the whole thing complete. But particularly before we ask Murphy to sign this agency agreement, we all got to be on the same page and make sure we're on board with the listing price. And honestly, you guys, I've walked away from listings before. I've thanked the sellers for their time and walked away because I do not believe in my heart of heart that I can sell their home for what they want. I don't know much about life, but I do know numbers don't lie. So by pulling the comps, looking at these CMAs, and again, you guys will talk more about that, what we're looking for this weekend. But as long as we're competently looking at these numbers and doing this research, then we can give our sellers our best educated guess. Do we like the T-bar so far? Does this help? I make it a personal mission in my class to convert everybody. I don't know that I always get 100%, But you know, and obviously we don't have time to go through all the math in the class, but like I said, I do think the T-bar can get us through most of the math. So again, general rule of thumb, when you see rate or percent, a little flag should go up for you, letting you know that for the most part, we can use a T-bar. What about unit 21 yet? Have you guys made it to unit 21, gone to closing? Not yet? Okay, I'll let Ann talk about that. She's going to talk to you about prorating. Somebody's going to owe somebody some money. Again, you guys are getting all my PowerPoints, so you'll have this, but I'll let Ann do that. Interim interest. Let's see, what else? Unit 4 math, area math. Okay, just real quick. Length times width equals square foot. When we're talking about length times width, we could be referring to room dimensions. So if you want to know how big is the kitchen, you go into the kitchen, you measure length times width, and you get square foot of the kitchen. If you're talking about land, we're still using the same formula. We might just say something different. Sometimes with land, we refer to it as front foot times depth. It's still length times width. So let's look at a picture. Let's pretend that this is your property. And of course, in front of the property, you have the road. The front foot, the first number given here, the length or the front foot, is the part of the land that runs parallel to the road. That's your front foot. The width or the depth, if you were to stand at your property with the road to your back, what we're saying is the depth is how deep is the lot, how far back does it go. So again, we could be measuring square footage for a kitchen. We could be measuring the land, front foot times depth. We're saying the same thing here. Everybody should be able to tell me how many square feet are in an acre.
43,560.
43,560. Have you guys, 4 little old ladies driving 35 and a 60. This is the number that we can use to convert square feet to acres. Acres to square feet to acres. Can I share a trick with you? I'm such a T-bar fan. I figured out how to make this work. I tweaked the T-bar just a hair. And instead of putting a rate or percent in the bottom right, we're going to use that magic number. Square feet goes on top, acres goes on bottom. The problem's not going to give you 43,560. That's a number that we need to know. So I'm glad you guys know that. Again, the question comes down to when do I divide and when do I multiply? And the T-bar allows me. So if I'm solving for the square footage, I take the acres times 43,560. That's going to give me square foot. If I'm solving for acres, I take square foot and divide it by 43,560. We need to know that 43,560. Have I got that jotted down?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's a couple questions for you guys. Or one question, I guess. We'll start with this. You can come in a private chat. About 15 more seconds. I'm watching our time too, so I don't want anybody to feel rushed, but this is a cram course after all. So this says a buyer purchased a piece of land that is 150 by 175. Isn't that your formula right there? What's the length? 150. What's the width? 175. So it actually gave you the formula. So all we have to do is take on your calculator 150 times 175, and we get square feet of 26,250. Length times width. Length is always going to be the first digit given. Okay, so when they give you something, there's a formula. All right, a little harder question for you now. How many acres is that? So while you guys are finishing up, let's start trying to interpret this a little bit. We've determined that there are 26,250 square feet. Is that more than or less than 43,560? More than or less than?
Less.
That is less than. So is this lot more than or less than 1 acre?
Less than 1 acre.
Less than, right? So before we even pick a calculator up, I can look at that number and say my answer had better be less than 1. Everybody with me?
Yes.
Right. So sometimes just like looking and thinking it through, guys, if you can eliminate an answer before you ever pick a calculator up, you have a better chance of getting it right. Remember, if you got 4, you got 25% chance. Once you eliminate 1, now you're up to 33%. And that much better odds than 25%. Y'all want to go to Vegas on 25% or 33% chance, right? So if we can increase our odds, then we have a better chance of getting it right. So now we want to know how many acres. Well, we took our T-bar and we tweaked it just a little bit. Instead of the rate of percent, we're going to use that magic number, 43,560. Square feet goes on top. And what I'm solving for is acres. The back fourth line, the horizontal line means divide. So we take 26,000 on our calculator, take 26,250, whoops, divide it by that magic number, 43,560. And I get 0.6 acres. I think, well, I don't think, I know. Understanding how to convert square feet to acres, acres to square feet is going to get us some of this. And again, I think we can use the T-bar. Now we don't have to know when do I divide, when do I multiply. Know the formula of the T-bar for this. Square feet's on top, acres bottom left, 43,560. Questions on this, comments?
I have a question. So, like you said, if we pick our favorite letter is B, we just pick all B, we can still pass the test, correct?
You can miss all the math. You can miss all the math. Now, you got to do better, right? Yeah.
Right. If I get some right, you know, my grade will be better. But if, just if, I pick the letter B.
You know, and that's, guys, this is why I don't want you to stress over math. I mean, seriously, this isn't a math test, you know. Let's talk about the real world for a second. In the real world, you got your phone, you got this amazing tool at your disposal on your phone called Google. You have a broker in charge, right? In the real world, I mean, you know, but even then, I mean, I don't know how many times I've been with buyers and we've been out on a property and they know the lot dimensions and they say to themselves, I wonder how many acres this is. And I whip my calculator out and I can tell them. As an agent, as their agent, do I kind of look like I know what I'm talking about? If I can help them determine that, impress the snot out of them and say, oh, beep, boop, boop, this is so many acres. And they go, wow, my agent may know a thing or two. As long as you tell them right. Make sure you understand it so you can tell them right. And that's why, I mean, we really don't spend a lot of time on the math because the math isn't the most important piece. When it comes to math, I am a big fan of practice, 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 because it may be really easy to watch me do it, but at some point you got to branch out on your own and, you know, try it on your own. I know one thing, you know, I said the number one question I get in math tutoring is when do you divide, when do you multiply? The second question I get in math tutoring is, can you sit with me when I take the test? And the answer is no. So at some point you got to break away from Annie and I. There's lots of math in your book. The units that discuss math, you have questions at the end of the unit. There's 50 math problems in the very back. Do you guys know about this yet? The very back of your book, you do? Those 50 problems? Yeah, good, because I'm not finding them real quick. Yeah, starting on page 803. Somebody just said that you need to study the T-bar. The book does introduce you to the T-bar. If you look back, starting on page 789, 789 kind of introduces you to the T-bar, 786. So that math facts section in your book, again, you can kind of use that. Now, with all that being said, I don't want you guys to spend all your study time between here and now focusing on the math, because again, the math alone can't fail you. I did not say don't study the math. I said don't spend all your study time on the math. Do I have any questions? Again, I'll send you all these PowerPoints. As long as I have your email address, please make sure I have your email address in the chat. Anything else?
You've been very helpful. Thank you.
Good. I was just getting ready to say, I hope this was worth your time. I appreciate you guys spending your Friday morning with me. So I hope it was worth your time.
Thank you.
I'm around for the next, what you got, a little over a week. So, you know, don't hesitate to reach out. Let me know if you have questions. Let me know if I can help. But otherwise, best of luck to you guys. And how about I'll see you in post-licensing next year?
Great.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Y'all enjoy the rest of your day.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you, you too.
Bye.